Today, Janice found herself in an unusually buoyant mood. The reason being, she was just days away from her long-anticipated break. It was her final week at work, and the prospect of an upcoming vacation fueled her excitement. After efficiently completing her work duties, she made her way home, completely unaware of the surprise that awaited her. That evening, she arrived home, her spirits higher than usual. Spotting her husband's packed suitcase in the hallway brought a delighted smile to her face. She assumed he had taken the initiative to pack for their vacation. Sean, her husband, was never particularly good at packing, yet this time he had not only managed to do it himself, but also found the travel pillow something she found both amusing and endearing. "Sean, my love, I'm back," Janice cheerfully announced as she entered the kitchen, but her happiness abruptly faded upon seeing the sight before her. Sean was seated at the kitchen table, a glass of wine in hand. He was dressed not in his usual casual home attire, but as if he was ready to leave the house. "Sweetheart, what's happening? Are you heading out?" she asked, her confusion apparent. "Janice, I'm weary," Sean began, his tone somber. "I need to go now. I need some time to unwind, to rest. I'm afraid I might be depressed." Janice stared at her husband, bewilderment clouding her eyes. "Darling, what do you mean? Can't you wait just one more week?" Janice was at a loss, unable to comprehend the sudden shift in her husband's mood. "You wouldn't understand, Janice," he replied tersely. "You're always cheerful at work, surrounded by your supportive team. Meanwhile, I'm here feeling low and in desperate need of a break." Her eyes then fell on a bank statement lying on the table. To her dismay, it was clear that Sean had transferred the money they had painstakingly saved together into his personal account. Holding the statement, she said, "Sean, what depression are you referring to? We've been saving this money for our shared vacation, for our trip to the Bahamas." "I've been eagerly waiting for this day, and now you're asking me to delay it because your work won't permit you a vacation?" Sean retorted, his voice beginning to show irritation. Janice could feel her anger brewing. "I never said my work wouldn't grant me a vacation," she fired back. "In fact, I agreed with them today that this is my last week. Besides, we never set a specific date for our trip. Why would you plan your leave now, when I can't join?" "You're not being rational today, Janice," he rebuked her. "I told you I'm exhausted. I've had enough of the dreary cold weather. I need a change, somewhere warm, somewhere peaceful." "And what about me?" she demanded, feeling neglected. Her husband merely shrugged in response. "Well, practically speaking, you can't come along. You're tied up with work. I don't understand why we're arguing about this. I'm the head of the family, and I get to decide what's best for us." Sean's brows furrowed, his anger visible. She watched him pack the rest of his belongings. This wasn't some ill-conceived jest. He was serious about leaving alone, without her. "But Sean, that's not fair," she protested. "We saved that money together. If you can't wait for me, at least you should only take your share. Once I get my leave, I'll join you or go somewhere else, using my portion." Sean paused and looked at her, his face devoid of empathy. "What do you want, Janice? Do you want me to stay and have a mental breakdown? How am I supposed to divide the money? What if I run out? How about this? If there's anything left, I'll bring it back. And Janice, I have a huge favor to ask. Don't ruin my mood before the trip. I've mentally already embarked on this journey. In fact, I've booked my flight for tonight." Janice was rendered speechless by his audacity, by the fact that he had already booked his ticket for that very evening. Words seemed to elude her. Pang of hurt constricted her throat, and she retreated to her room to avoid witnessing her husband's departure. She had sensed something amiss lately. He'd been acting out of character, coming home late, initiating uncharacteristic, lengthy conversations. She just couldn't put her finger on why his behavior had suddenly altered. Janice had initially tucked away such troubling thoughts. The fear of confronting them was too daunting. She didn't want to dwell on suspicions that might turn out to be baseless. Instead, she decided to calmly assess the situation. Could it be that she was overreacting? Maybe it wasn't so unusual for a married couple to take separate vacations occasionally. But then, the resounding slam of the front door caused Janice to startle. Did he just leave without even saying goodbye? That can't be happening, she pondered. She stepped out of the room, only to be greeted by the harsh reality that it indeed could happen. Just as she was on the brink of tears, something on the table caught her eye. Sean had left his phone behind. He had a password she didn't know, but an incoming message briefly lit up the screen. providing her enough time to read it. "I'm already at the airport, waiting for you, babe. Give me a call when you get there." Before she could process the message, the front door creaked open and Sean re-entered. He eyed Janice suspiciously, grabbed his phone, then planted a quick kiss on her cheek. "I've got a dash, love. Don't worry about a thing." Janice was momentarily frozen, then swiftly dressed and bolted out the door, frantically waving for a taxi. Their ride to the airport was the longest, most excruciating journey she'd ever taken. She didn't know where to look for him, but unfortunately, they were immediately noticeable, their behavior reminiscent of smitten high school sweethearts. The woman was considerably younger than her. A gasp escaped Janice as she covered her mouth with her hand, watching them from a distance. So, this was it. 5 years of married life. 5 years of believing we were a happy family, she mused. Janice and Sean's story had begun in college. Sean was late for an English class. He was the last one to enter, and there was only one vacant seat. By a stroke of fate, that seat was right next to a very beautiful girl, Janice. Janice was a radiant beauty, so stunning that many guys felt too intimidated to approach her. This lack of attention, paradoxically, dented Janice's self-confidence. She started to believe something was amiss with her, so when Sean ended up sitting next to her, she was immediately intrigued by his apparent courage. For Sean, however, he saw no other choice. He felt at ease sitting next to such an attractive girl, not because he was overly confident, but rather because he deemed himself invisible to her. He believed that he didn't stand a chance, so there was nothing to lose or be nervous about. When a class discussion paired them up, Sean found a reason to talk to her. That's when he discovered that Janice was not just beautiful, but also humble and friendly. Maybe that was when he realized he could sway Janice to his favor. As time went on, Sean grew more comfortable chatting with her, even forgetting their perceived social gap. One day, he offered her a ride home after class. By the end of the semester, they were officially dating. After graduation, they took the next step and got married. But now, their marital bliss had crumbled. Sean was using their shared savings to whisk his mistress away to the Bahamas, while Janice would have to return to work the next day. She would come home to an empty house, waiting for her husband's return from his escapade. She felt utterly alone, without anyone to confide in, seek advice from, or even just vent to. Janice had grown up fatherless, a void that had always gnawed at her. She never experienced a father's guidance, love, or protection, a hollow feeling that left her feeling incomplete. People told her that as she grew older, she would overcome the absence and move on, but the opposite happened. The void magnified over time. In retrospect, she realized she tolerated so much of Sean's unacceptable behavior because she had no model of how a man should treat her. It pained her every time she mulled over this, and now it hurt even more as she found herself stranded in her sorrow with no one to turn to. Janice lost her mother at the tender age of 18. She had since been living with her aunt, but she always felt like an outsider. Her aunt insisted that Janice receive the same treatment as her own children, but Janice knew otherwise. She understood there was no substitute for a mother's love. She managed to stick it out with her aunt's family until she could escape to college. In the blossoming phase of their relationship, living with Sean was nothing short of a paradise for her. The world seemed brighter, and their home was a cocoon of joy and love. However, as the leaves of time turned over, she began to unravel a less pleasing facet of Sean. She realized he was more aware of her vulnerabilities than she had ever been, and was subtly manipulating them for his own advantage. Sean was employed part-time, a fact she was initially accepting of. Meanwhile, she dutifully clocked in her full-time hours, not begrudging him his seemingly easier schedule. However, she began to recognize an unspoken expectation falling heavily on her shoulders. The household chores were her domain alone. Every single day, she found herself knee-deep in dirty laundry, battling with stubborn stains and ironing out wrinkled clothes. Her hands constantly pruned from washing the never-ending pile of dishes, remnants of their meals serving as a constant reminder of her thankless job. And cooking, that was an entirely different ballgame. Every night, like a ritual, she would be seen juggling pans and pots, stirring a delicious meal for Sean, who was ensconced in his own world. Despite all this, she remained silent, choosing to swallow her frustration rather than voice it. "Oh well, it's just one of those things," she would often mutter to herself, downplaying her growing resentment. Sean, on the other hand, was oblivious to her mounting exhaustion. He relished in the luxury of sleeping late, the sun high and bright before he would even stir from bed. His days was often spent locked away in his computer room, engrossed in his virtual world, leaving her alone to manage their real one. One evening while she was busy stirring the pot, she called out, "Sean, could you please give me a hand with setting the table?" "Later, love," came the distant reply from the computer room as always. She sighed, dropping the subject, just as she had done countless times before. Yet the silent plea for acknowledgement lingered in the air, marking the growing distance between them. When Sean's father Robert fell seriously ill, Sean implored Janice to move in with him, expressing a dutiful desire to look after his ailing father. Robert was aging, frail, and evidently incapable of managing himself alone. But as Janice had anticipated, she ended up shouldering the responsibilities of two men instead of one. However, Janice held no resentment toward Robert. Instead, she embraced him as though he were her own father, caring for him with patience and kindness. Robert, in turn, grew exceptionally fond of Janice. He noticed, perhaps more acutely than she realized, the imbalance in the way his son treated her. One day, he shared cryptic advice with her, saying, "You, my dear, were never meant to settle." His words puzzled her, leaving a question in her mind that would resurface later. When Robert's health improved, he suggested they return to their own home, grateful for his recovery but exhausted from the additional caregiving. A few months after they were settled, tragedy struck Janice's family. Her aunt succumbed to a heart attack. Although Janice felt a twinge of sadness that she wasn't treated with the same warmth her aunt showed her own daughters, her heart still ached at the loss. After all, it was this woman who sheltered and fed her after her own mother's untimely death. Deep down, she harbored a profound love for her aunt. 3 days into her mourning, Sean lost his temper at Janice. "She's dead, Janice. Stop bringing her up, and for God's sake, stop crying," he exploded. "Sean," Janice retorted, her voice wavering, "it's only been 3 days." She hadn't even cried that much. Her grief was mostly silent, carried in her heart rather than shown on her face, yet Sean seemed to have little understanding or patience for her quiet sorrow. Now, in the bustling airport, Janice snapped back to reality from her chain of thoughts. A part of her wanted to confront Sean, to vent her anger on his mistress, but it was too late. They had vanished into the crowd, while the airport buzzed with people rushing to catch their flights. She stumbled out into the street, vision blurred with tears. As she blindly bumped into passerby, they deftly steered clear of her. In her emotional haze, she took a turn into a quiet alleyway and found a bench blanketed with snow. She sat down and let her tears flow freely. Janice lost track of time. She was roused from her sobs by the biting cold. In her emotional fog, a blizzard had crept up on her. She stood up, dusted the snow off, and rubbed her frost-coated eyes. Her eyelashes were fluffy with ice crystals, a sight that might have been beautiful if she could have seen it. As she started walking towards the exit of the alley, she noticed a man hunched over on the curb, his figure coated in snow. Her first thought was that he must be out of his mind to sit in this freezing weather. She was too wrapped up in her own turmoil to concern herself with him. As she walked past him, a glimpse of his eyes, empty and lost, tugged at her heartstrings. On impulse, she turned back and walked over to him. She rummaged in her pockets, found some cash, and extended it to him. He looked up at her with his melancholic eyes. He made no move to take the money, just went back to staring blankly into the distance. Caught off guard, Janice blurted, "Excuse me, sir, might you need some assistance?" She received no response. She found herself questioning her actions. What on earth am I doing, offering help to a stranger who won't even acknowledge me? In a desperate attempt, she suggested, "Perhaps I could get you a warm tea or something?" The faintest hint of a smile tugged at the corners of the man's lips. Encouraged, she didn't wait for an affirmation. She stepped into a nearby cafe, purchased a hot tea and a sandwich, and brought them back to the man. Regardless of her own troubles, aiding the man brought a comforting feeling of accomplishment. It was as if she could momentarily set her worries aside. She handed the man the steaming cup of tea and the sandwich. He looked up at her. This time, his eyes reflected gratitude. As she walked away, the residual warmth in her heart made her feel slightly better. She was hailing a taxi when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find the man standing there. "I'm sorry, miss. I forgot to express my gratitude. Thank you for your kindness," he said softly. She responded with a faint smile. It's no trouble at all. We all face problems in life. I hope you find your way out of yours." "Thank you," he replied. Turning around, he slowly began to walk away. As he did, Janice noticed him shivering in the cold. A sudden urge surged within her to extend further help. "Wait," she called out after him. "How about you come to my place? You can warm up there and I can make you a hot meal." The man looked taken aback. "Are you sure? I'm just a homeless man." Janice shrugged. "Have you spotted any royalty here?" "I guess not, but it's unusual. Most people avoid me." "People are different, that's all," she concluded. Janice waved down a taxi. Upon seeing her, the driver wore a friendly smile and held the door open. However, his expression shifted to unease when Janice extended her hand to help the homeless man into the vehicle. "I can't believe it. Are you actually bringing him along?" "He's not stepping foot in my car, lady. I'm sorry." "Excuse me?" Janice replied, taken aback. "I'm sorry, but look at him. He's clearly not clean and he has a strong odor. I'm going to have to cancel your ride." "Who's going to cover the cleaning costs?" the driver retorted. Janice, angered by the driver's blatant disrespect, clenched her jaw, reached into her purse, and pulled out a wad of cash. "Would this sway your opinion?" she asked, handing him the money. The driver took the money, his fingers swiftly counting the bills. Once he recognized the generous amount, a grin spread across his face. "All right then, get in." The hefty amount Janice had handed the driver seemed to make him chatty. He nattered on about the weather and griped about the low fares he usually received. Once they reached their destination, the driver sped away swiftly. Upon entering the warm house, the homeless man let out a satisfied sigh. "It's so cozy here," the man said. "I'm going to heat up some food. You're welcome to warm up here or take a hot shower. The bathroom has towels and a rope you can use." "Thank you. I know I'm imposing, but I'll gladly accept your offer. Things have been pretty tough, particularly without a proper bath," he admitted. Janice questioned her sanity several times over. After all, she had invited an absolute stranger into her home. She didn't even know his name, and now this man was in her bathroom. Regardless of how many times she questioned her decision, she couldn't find a logical explanation. It was a spur-of-the-moment choice. Her life would never be the same from this day forward. She was just putting the finishing touches on the table when the man emerged from the bathroom, fresh and clean. Janice gawked in surprise and finally remarked, "You look like a different person." He chuckled in response. Janice had managed to set the table in the meantime. As Dylan, the guest who had unexpectedly filled the chair usually occupied by Sean, tasted the warm meal, he complimented its flavors. His words weren't just a passing comment, but genuine praise about the deliciousness of the food. As she listened to him, Janice had an epiphany. It had been an eternity since she had received any form of appreciation. Dylan, a man who was still essentially a stranger to her, displayed a keen sense of observation. He pointed out specific elements of the meal, appreciating the subtle blending of spices and the perfect balance of flavors. This simple act of recognition, so genuine and spontaneous, stirred something within Janice. It sent a ripple of excitement through her heart. It was then that she realized how accustomed she had become to her labor of love being overlooked. For so long she had toiled tirelessly without a word of thanks or a morsel of gratitude. But with just a few sincere words, Dylan had managed to validate her efforts, and for that, she felt a warm glow of appreciation. Feeling a sense of comfort in Dylan's company, Janice found the courage to ask, "So, what's your story?" As the words left her lips, she saw a sudden shift in Dylan's demeanor. His easy smile faltered, and his eyes welled up with unshed tears. It was clear that revisiting his past was a road paved with sorrow for him. Just 2 short years ago, Dylan's life was the picture of normality, the kind most people yearned for. A loving wife, a sweet little daughter, and a cozy house in the suburbs painted a picture of perfect domesticity. They had plans for a joyous family trip to celebrate their daughter's 6th birthday. They had all been looking forward to the little getaway, but life had other plans. As they drove on the rain-soaked mountain pass, their car lost control, skidded dangerously, and plunged over the guardrail. In that terrifying moment, Dylan's world was shattered. His wife and daughter, the core of his existence, were cruelly snatched away in the tragic accident. It was a harsh twist of fate that Dylan himself survived the crash, physically unharmed but emotionally devastated. As he shared his story, the pain in his voice echoed in the silence of the room. Janice could feel the heart-wrenching sorrow etched into every word. The anguish of losing his loved ones was more than Dylan could bear. He was engulfed by a sea of guilt, pinning the blame for their untimely deaths squarely on himself. Residing in a house once pulsing with life, the merry laughter of his little girl, the loving whispers of his wife, was now a torturous ordeal. The walls echoed with their memories, every corner a cruel reminder of his loss. To numb the piercing pain and escape his tormenting thoughts, he sought solace in the bitter embrace of alcohol, but the temporary escape soon spiraled into a damaging habit. As he retreated into a shell of self-condemnation, he pushed away everyone who attempted to extend a helping hand. Friends, family, their efforts to pull him out of his despair met with a brick wall of refusal. For Dylan, life had lost its luster, its very essence fading into the gloom of his grief. His mounting addiction and the hollow echo of his family's laughter in his lonely house began to take a toll on his professional life. He received multiple warnings from his employers, each one falling on deaf ears. Inevitably, he was fired. A few months later, with his finances drained and debts mounting, he was evicted from the home that had once been the center of his universe. His life, once marked by love and laughter, had succumbed to an unending spiral of despair. Finding sustenance became a daily battle for Dylan. Initially, he resorted to foraging from trash dumpsters, an experience that left him grappling with feelings of degradation and despair. However, as he gradually learned the ropes of street survival, he discovered that there were some restaurants willing to lend a helping hand to the homeless. Establishments specializing in bread products, such as bagels and sandwiches, often had surplus food that they were willing to give away. His guilt over the tragic loss of his family had initially led him to this destitute lifestyle. However, over time, he began to see the damaging effects of homelessness. The harsh realities of street life began to weigh heavily on him, pulling him down into a cycle of despair that seemed increasingly difficult to escape. The lifestyle he had initially chosen as a form of self-punishment was now trapping him, threatening to consume him entirely. Janice listened to his tale with a heavy heart, her empathy palpable. She reassured him that he shouldn't bear the blame for the accident. She implored him to understand that a life consumed by guilt wasn't worth living. Her words were earnest, full of compassion and wisdom, as she painted a picture of promising future that awaited him if he could only stop blaming himself and start putting his life back together. Throughout their conversation, Janice maintained steady eye contact, her eyes radiating warmth and understanding. Her kind smile never faltered, offering him comfort and acceptance. For Dylan, who hadn't felt such warmth and kindness in 2 long years, her generosity was overwhelming. This encounter with a complete stranger who had not only let him in for a hot shower and a meal, but had also offered him empathy and advice, was a ray of hope in his otherwise bleak existence. The spark of hope that Dylan felt was unlike anything he'd experienced in the past 2 years. He had spent so long aimlessly wandering, living on the streets, nursing his guilt and steeped in his sorrow. He had almost forgotten what it felt like to have a purpose, a goal, a desire for a future that held more than just mere survival. Meeting Janice, receiving her compassion and understanding, and hearing her encouraging words had triggered something within him. He felt a strong pull, a stirring in his heart to break free from his self-imposed chains. He began to envision a future where he could stand tall, a future where the pains of the past did not dictate his path. The desire to change was no longer a mere thought, but a compelling force driving him. He longed for the warmth of a home, the comfort of a steady job, and the healing power of connections with others. Most of all, he yearned for self-redemption, a chance to forgive himself, and the opportunity to rebuild his life from the ruins. At one point, Dylan realized he was still dressed in a borrowed robe. He jumped up, looking at himself awkwardly. "Is this your—" he started, but Janice offered a sad smile. "It's okay. Don't worry about it." Dylan sat back down. Once they had finished their meal, he rose and began gathering his dirty clothes. Sensing his discomfort, Janice told him he could use her washing machine and stay the night. "I'm sorry for being such a burden. I don't even know how to thank you." "It's all right, Dylan. Don't worry. Everything's okay." "Thank you once again." Dylan hesitated before asking his next question. "Janice, may I use your computer, please?" Dylan requested, breaking the silence. "Of course, feel free," she responded, gesturing towards her laptop. As Dylan began clicking away on her laptop, Janice sat in the living room, her mind swirling with her own tales of sorrow. She longed to unburden her heart to this stranger who had shared his deepest pain with her, but the words remained stuck in her throat. Gathering her courage, she rose and walked over to Dylan. "Dylan," she started, her voice shaking slightly, "I don't want you to think less of me for letting a stranger into my home. It's just, my husband, well, I hardly know how to put it. Today he left for a vacation with his mistress." Dylan's fingers froze above the keyboard, and he turned to look at her, his eyes widening in surprise. "Really? That happened?" She nodded, sharing a brief overview of her predicament. Dylan shook his head in disbelief. "I thought this kind of thing only happened in movies. I'm really sorry to hear that." "So what's your next move?" She sighed heavily before responding. "I'm gonna file for divorce, but..." "But what?" Dylan urged her to continue. "I'm just not sure. He might not be on board with the idea." Dylan paused, his brows furrowing before he let out a soft chuckle. "Wait, so let me get this straight. Your husband is off gallivanting with his mistress, and you're worried he might not like the idea of a divorce?" The absurdity of the situation was evident, but it wasn't amusing. As Dylan looked into Janice's eyes, he saw a hint of fear mingling with the confusion. This kind, innocent woman, so beautiful in her simplicity, was caught in a whirlpool of emotional turmoil. "Are you scared of him?" he gently asked. "I don't know. We've been together for 5 years, and now I just don't know what to do." Dylan nodded sympathetically. "Go ahead and get some rest, Janice. We'll figure something out together." Dylan shook his head again and turned back to the computer screen. Exhausted, Janice decided to stretch out on the couch. She was awoken by the sound of her alarm clock the next morning. As she walked into the living room, she realized Dylan was gone. He had left a note on the side table. "Thank you. Till we meet again." Suddenly, the house felt too quiet. Janice was hit by a wave of unexpected loneliness. It was as if she had lost something precious. She shuffled into the kitchen to make herself a coffee. The subsequent 2 weeks passed in a blur. Janice threw herself into her work, staying late into the night just so she could return home exhausted and fall straight to sleep. 3 days after Sean departed, Janice mustered all her courage and started the divorce process. Methodically, she packed up all his belongings, including the robe Dylan had worn after his shower. Now, all she needed to do was deliver the divorce papers, return his possessions, and erase him from her life. She changed the house locks too, just for good measure. This house was her sanctuary, a place that she had inherited from her parents. It was the one thing that was unquestionably hers, and yet she felt a creeping unease that she might have to battle to keep it. Oddly enough, she found her thoughts straying to Dylan more than to Sean. Dylan, who had appeared in her life as a homeless stranger, only to reveal himself as a completely different person. Janice had expected to be devastated by her husband's betrayal, but her heart remained quiet. Instead, she felt a sense of relief. At least she was no longer living in ignorance, fooled by a man she thought she knew. It often happens that everyone else knows about the betrayal, and wives are the last to find out. It can make them appear foolish in the eyes of others. Janice's mood only improved with her newfound freedom. She was already envisioning herself preparing a salad and watching a romantic film, enjoying a quiet evening at home. One evening after work, her tranquil days were interrupted. As she was approaching the house, she saw Sean pacing near the house's entrance, likely cold from the chill. She recalled having blocked his number on her phone and felt a small burst of joy that he hadn't been able to disrupt her day earlier. "Janice, what the hell is going on? What did you do to the lock? And what about my phone? Why do I have to freeze out here?" Sean demanded. Janice faced him calmly, a slight smile gracing her lips as she spoke. "I've changed the lock, Sean, and I've blocked your number." His surprise was evident, but it was short-lived. "Have you lost your mind? Who do you think you are? Hand over the keys now, and you go for a 3-hour walk in the cold. See how you like it." Janice calmly searched through her bag, causing Sean to smirk in satisfaction. She realized with a jolt how accustomed she had become to his bullying tactics, and how often she had let it pass in the past. However, instead of keys, she produced a document. "Here, these are divorce papers." Sean took the papers without thinking. "Whose divorce?" he asked, bewildered. "Ours, Sean. I know you didn't go to the Bahamas by yourself. I saw you with her. You can pick up your belongings any day, just not today. Today, I don't want to see you." He took a few breaths, and when everything dawned on him, he surprisingly spoke quite confidently. "Well, guess what? You're a brat to follow me like that. Good wives close their eyes on such things to save the marriage, and you chose the hard path. I'm a young and handsome man. I'm interesting, and women approach me." Janice interrupted him. "Well, then you won't have to spend the night on the streets." She spoke while looking at the driveway. She had never seen such cars appear in their neighborhood. A convoy of 3 large SUVs quietly entered and stopped. At that moment, Sean grabbed her hand. "You're gonna do what I say. You thought you could leave me just like that? Well, you were wrong. I'm gonna make your life miserable. Give me the keys, now." He raised his other hand to strike Janice. She closed her eyes and in the next moment realized that no one was holding her hand anymore. "Janice, are you okay?" She opened her eyes. It couldn't be. It was Dylan's voice. He was standing in front of her, rubbing his fist. Behind him, Sean was struggling in the snow, while a few strong guys stood between Dylan and Sean. Janice smiled. "It's you?" "Yes, it's me. I was worried I wouldn't make it in time. Any chance you have more of those delicious meals?" Dylan asked, a smile lighting up his eyes. Janice nodded, her eyes suddenly brimming with tears. Evidently, all the pent-up tension and stress had finally found a release. She buried her face into Dylan's chest, staining his expensive coat with tears. He gently patted her back, softly uttering, Hey, it's okay. Everything's okay now." Sean, who was struggling to get back on his feet, was a mere spectator in this emotional reunion. His earlier arrogance was replaced with a stunned and shocked expression. Dylan's arrival not only saved Janice from the immediate threat posed by Sean, but also signaled a turning point in her life. It was the moment when she finally let go of her past and took the first step towards a new and potentially happier life. As for Sean, he watched his whole world crumble in front of his eyes. His threats fell on deaf ears, and the realization of losing Janice began to sink in. Comfortably nestled in front of the television, Janice busied herself with brewing some fresh tea as Dylan began to reveal another part of his life that he hadn't previously shared with her. The words she had imparted to him about letting go of the past and forging ahead had struck a chord deep within him. She had unknowingly guided him towards a newfound sense of purpose and resilience. Once again embarking on the path of professionalism, Dylan returned to his previous job, to the joy and relief of his friends and colleagues who had missed his presence. As an agent for the Secret Service, he held a unique and critical role. His first order of business upon his return was to ensure Janice's safety and security, establishing a protective detail to watch over her. "You pulled me back from the brink, Janice," he admitted. "I couldn't simply overlook the kindness you've shown me." Janice looked at him in disbelief. "Secret Service, huh?" she repeated, trying to comprehend the information. Dylan nodded, sipping his tea. "Yes, I've been working there for years. When I lost my family, I lost myself too. I left everything behind and spiraled into a dark place. I couldn't even bring myself to reach out to my colleagues. But you reminded me that life is worth living, that it's possible to start anew even when it feels like the world has ended." Janice was silent, stunned. A multitude of emotions flashed in her eyes: surprise, confusion, appreciation, and something else Dylan couldn't quite identify. After a moment, she managed a small smile. "Thank you for everything." The tranquil silence that now enveloped Janice's house was a stark contrast to the turmoil that had taken place just an hour earlier. The events had unfolded so swiftly that Janice was still reeling from them. Dylan had departed without uttering any promises, without giving her any clues about his next course of action. He had simply thanked her and left. Remarkably, despite Sean's deeds, Dylan had managed to find a silver lining. In a tone brimming with sarcasm, he thanked Sean for his indiscretions. If it hadn't been for Sean's affair, Dylan would have never crossed paths with Janice. He expressed his gratitude for this unexpected, yet significant meeting, adding another layer of complexity to the day's events. 2 days passed, filled with mundane routine work and quiet evenings at home. The roller coaster of emotions from a couple of days ago had begun to subside, leaving Janice with an unusual sense of tranquility mixed with curiosity about what the future held. One evening, after a long day at work, Janice was heading back home. As she walked along the familiar route, she saw a figure that made her heart flutter. There, standing a little distance from her front gate, was Dylan. He stood tall under the gentle evening light, his silhouette casting a long shadow on the pavement. He was looking her way, a smile illuminating his face. In his hands he held a bunch of flowers, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the fading light of the day. His appearance was significantly different from their last encounter. He was well-groomed and dressed neatly, a far cry from the disheveled man she had first met. His eyes, once haunted by despair, were now twinkling with hope and what seemed like happiness. At that moment, Janice remembered her ex-husband's father's words. "You, my dear, were never meant to settle." She now understood the meaning of his words. The puppy shifted its gaze between a man and a woman, its eyes filled with indifference to its fate. He was the last pup. His siblings had already been taken by people. At first it was scary, but now he calmly watched feet rushing by. "Ma'am, would you like this puppy? I have only one left," the mustache seller called out to the potential buyer. "Is it a purebred?" she asked, looking at him with doubt. "No, it's a mix, but he won't get sick easily. He's like a bloodhound, but as smart as a German shepherd." The seller promoted his product. "There are tons of these roaming the streets. You can take them for free," the woman replied, her eyes still fixed on the puppy. "I beg to differ. This one is special. His mom is a race winner, and the dad is one of those you mentioned. I can show you the papers," the man said, smirking as he presented the documents. Indeed," the woman acknowledged. Mrs. Chelsea Leonard didn't have much money, not enough to buy the German shepherd she had always dreamed of. Even this mixed breed would cost her a significant amount. She wanted to leave, but couldn't stop staring at the adorable face of the lonely puppy who reminded her of herself. "Don't worry. He'll be great company, an even better guard dog than a purebred. Here, I'll give you this training manual for free." Mrs. Leonard thought for a moment and decided that money couldn't buy happiness. The mustache seller would surely find a way to get rid of the puppy if no one bought it. That way, the poor pup would end up scavenging from trash cans, struggling to survive. "All right, I guess I'll take him," the woman smiled. The puppy sensed something was about to happen, and fear filled his eyes. He had lost his mom when he and his siblings were taken away. Then his brothers and sisters were gone too. Now the scariest part awaited, being taken away himself. Overwhelmed, he couldn't help but pee on the seller, who laughed as he handed the animal to the woman. Instead of rough hands, the puppy found himself in the soft, warm embrace of the woman. Snuggled against her chest, he relaxed and felt content. When Mrs. Leonard opened the door to her apartment, the puppy was already dozing, and so began their years-long friendship. Mrs. Leonard opened the door, and Milo, a medium-sized dog with intelligent eyes, bounded outside. He wagged his tail happily in farewell. She closed the door and glanced at her mobile phone screen. Milo would be back in an hour as part of his training to become more independent. Over the past several months, Milo had learned to go for walks on his own. This change came about when Chelsea's health declined to the point that she couldn't take Milo for walks every day. Everyone in the neighborhood knew Milo, so there were no conflicts. Children loved playing with him, and he even let the smallest ones ride on his back. This made Milo a beloved companion not only to Chelsea, but to most of other residents in the building as well. Chelsea turned around and slowly walked back to her room. At over 65 years old, each year brought an unpleasant diagnosis or a complication from an existing condition. Her heart was the primary concern, making itself known during bad weather, when Milo pulled her around the park, or when her stepson Colby caused trouble. The latter was especially difficult for her. Colby despised his stepmother ever since his father passed away. He acted as if she had killed his father, but Chelsea had loved her husband deeply. He always cared for Colby, trying her best to fill the void left by his late mother. Chelsea didn't know why Colby hated her so much. Perhaps it was jealousy, but they couldn't be a family as Chelsea's affection was always met with negativity. After his father's passing, Colby's anger intensified when he drank, becoming furious that Chelsea lived in what he considered his father's apartment. He would demand she leave, but the apartment had been purchased jointly with Chelsea's husband, making it legally hers. Regardless, she would never kick her stepson out. Chelsea suspected that Colby's hatred and anger had altered him internally, preventing him from becoming a well-adjusted man. Colby was lonely, rude, and surrounded by fellow drinkers. Rarely sober, he struggled to find steady work and relied on odd jobs to make ends meet. He didn't try to change, only harboring hatred for everything and everyone. He blamed everyone but himself and his drinking. His drunken tirades often targeted Chelsea, accusing her of driving his father to an early grave when he drank alone at home. Loneliness only intensified his harsh words. Despite his rude behavior, Chelsea endured Colby's antics and tried to calm him, which only made things worse. Often, these fights led to emergency services being called for the elderly woman, as her heart couldn't handle the stress. When Colby was caught for robbery and sent to jail, Chelsea enjoyed a brief respite. He was given a 5-year sentence but was released after 1 year for good behavior. Upon his return, the fights resumed, and Chelsea's health quickly deteriorated. She knew she couldn't continue living like this and needed to take action. All Chelsea wanted was a peaceful life, but Colby was determined to make her miserable, intent on claiming the apartment for himself. From the beginning, Milo had never liked Colby. When Colby was drunk, he would throw empty bottles at Milo, causing the dog to hide in Chelsea's bedroom. Despite the abuse she endured herself, Chelsea fiercely protected Milo as if he were a baby. Gradually, Milo grew into a large dog and began to bark back. A year later, he even bit Colby once, which made Colby hysterical. After that incident, Colby stopped picking on the dog, and their relationship devolved into a cold war. Milo would growl, and Colby would threaten to poison him, but fortunately, things never escalated beyond threats. Chelsea and Milo's friendship resembled that of a little girl and her dog. Unable to have children of her own due to medical reasons, Chelsea poured all her love into her pet, and Milo reciprocated. Milo brought her new life. The training manual proved invaluable, and Chelsea diligently trained Milo. He was intelligent, active, and a quick learner, treating the training like a game that made him happy. His ever-wagging tail confirmed his joy. Being retired allowed Chelsea plenty of free time, which she spent outdoors, away from the alcohol-scented apartment. She was glad to be outside, keeping active and giving Milo space to run. In the first month, Milo learned to give his paw and fetch a stick. More complex commands followed, and soon Milo caught the attention of neighborhood children who watched his training. Initially hesitant, they gradually grew braver and approached Chelsea, asking to pet Milo. Chelsea initially worried that Milo might misinterpret the outstretched hands of the children as a threat, but his wagging tail reassured her otherwise. Milo gradually became the favorite dog in the neighborhood, and soon parents joined the children in interacting with him. One day, as Chelsea prepared to go to the store, she noticed Milo sleeping and decided not to wake him. Colby was snoring in his room. Got drunk again? At least he won't pick on Milo, Chelsea thought as she closed the door. Despite the gloomy autumn weather outside, Chelsea felt content. People with sullen faces walked past her, mirroring the dreary atmosphere. Chelsea wanted to smile at everyone. The pharmacist, seeing her long list of prescriptions, smiled back and asked if everything was okay with her. Meanwhile, Colby woke up, disturbed by the noise. He had a terrible hangover and frantically searched for something to drink, preferably with alcohol. Finding nothing, he opened his eyes, furious at everything around him and the source of the noise that woke him up. The noise was Milo's whining as he tried to get out of the apartment. "Stupid dog," Colby muttered, tolerating the dog's antics for a while before reaching his boiling point. He didn't want to get up, but the noise was too irritating to ignore. Finally, he got out of bed. "I'm gonna get you, you stupid dog," Colby threatened as he walked out. He noticed Chelsea wasn't home and wondered why she had left without her beloved dog. After standing there for a few minutes, an idea crossed his mind. He had long wanted to get rid of the old woman who he felt poisoned his life with her presence. He had considered numerous options, but since she refused to leave the apartment voluntarily, claiming it was legally hers, he resorted to targeting her health. If she ended up in the hospital, that was good. If she died, even better. As far as he knew, Chelsea had no other relatives, which meant he would be the legal heir to the apartment after her death. Colby knew how much Chelsea loved Milo and thought that if he could get rid of the dog, he would break her spirit. Milo had always growled at Colby when he approached his football, but now the dog was focused on getting out to find Chelsea. Colby thought that if he let Milo out now, the dog might get lost. He approached the front door, momentarily forgetting his hostile relationship with Milo. The dog reminded him by turning around and growling.
Calm down now, you doggy. I want to let you out to your mama. Milo looked at Colby suspiciously and stopped growling. Colby noticed that Milo had intelligent eyes as he took a careful step towards the door. Milo watched him intently and didn't turn his back. Colby turned the lock, and a blast of cold wind brought a familiar smell with it. Milo happily bounded outside, and Colby whistled to himself as he returned to the kitchen to find a cure for his hangover. Despite his headache, he was in a good mood, just like Chelsea. Chelsea's mood took a dive when she saw that half of her pension would have to go towards paying for her medicine. She needed the money to live on and pay her bills. Since Colby didn't have an income, Chelsea was covering everything on her own. As she stood there lost in thought, the pharmacist interrupted her with a question. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" Chelsea asked. "Is that your dog trying to get in?" The young woman pointed at the door with a smile. Chelsea turned around and was surprised to see Milo there. "Milo, what are you doing here?" Then she turned back to the pharmacist and said, "Yes, that's my dog Milo, but he was supposed to be asleep at home." Milo saw that Chelsea had noticed him and stopped trying to get in. He sat down and leaned his head to the side. With just one look, Milo made Chelsea smile and forget her worries. She paid for her medicine and walked out to give her pet a hug. Milo happily wagged his tail and swept the floor with his broom tail. "How did you get out, boy?" Chelsea asked. Milo licked Chelsea's face, and she was surprised at how he had found her. The road back home was winding, and she had come to this store because it offered discounts for retired people. She had never taken Milo with her to the store, which meant he had followed her scent. This realization made Chelsea think. When she noticed that Milo couldn't have gotten out on his own, she decided not to say anything to Colby. However, when Colby saw the dog happily wagging its tail, his face changed, which gave Chelsea an idea about him. Chelsea decided to try to train Milo to go to the store for her. Colby refused to help Chelsea, so Milo was her only hope. She didn't know if she could train him, but she was willing to try anyway. Her neighbors liked her, and she was known as a calm old woman, but not very sociable. People didn't talk to each other in that building, they just greeted each other and that was it. However, the children loved Milo and showered him with affection. Colby was not well liked by the residents either. Chelsea felt lonely among thousands of people around her. "You have to scratch the door like this," Chelsea instructed Milo on how to open the store's door. The pharmacist was busy dealing with an old man, counting his bills. She glanced over and saw the familiar face of her regular customer, Chelsea, and her dog. Milo gazed back and forth between the door and Chelsea. It wasn't clear what he wanted to do, so Chelsea repeated the command. "Mrs. Leonard, please come in." The young pharmacist smiled. Chelsea was instructing Milo. "Look, Milo, you have to hand over the note to this lady, all right?" "What are you guys doing?" The young woman smiled. "I'm training my dog to come here for me. Do you mind if I train my dog to bring you the prescriptions? I will be paying online, and Milo will be picking them up," Chelsea explained. The pharmacist looked doubtful and asked, "Don't you have any other options?" She had never faced this request before in her career. Chelsea painted the picture that she had nobody else to turn to for help, and the young woman hesitantly agreed. She liked the dog and wanted to help the old woman. Over the next few weeks, Chelsea mustered all her strength to train her pet. It was tough to teach Milo to be independent, which was why she was letting him out alone for an hour. However, Milo often came running back because Chelsea was all he could think about. He would often whine, not understanding why Chelsea was behaving like that with him. Chelsea didn't enjoy hearing Milo's whining on one side and Colby swearing on the other side of the door. The next step was to teach Milo the route so that he could safely navigate around the city and across the streets on his own. This stage was quite easy and he passed it quickly. The hardest part of the training was still ahead of them. Chelsea had to make sure Milo could do everything when she gave him the command. As if sensing that he was being given an important task, it took Milo several tries to finally master it. A month later, Milo could do the route on his own for the first time, which was a rescue for Chelsea. One day, Chelsea woke up feeling extremely sick. Her blood pressure was high and her heart was pounding fast for no reason. When she got up from bed, she felt dizzy and it became dark in her eyes. Milo lifted his head up, concerned, and looked at Chelsea as if asking if she was okay. "It's all right, Milo. We'll get through this," Chelsea told Milo, but her head was spinning. and all she wanted to do at that point was collapse back onto the bed. When she looked in the mirror, the picture was sad. She had circles under her eyes, her face was swollen, and she breathed heavily, and this was only because she had gotten out of bed. "I'm old," Chelsea thought to herself, feeling sad. She walked to the stand and was shocked to realize that she didn't have her medicine. There was just a note with a list of things she needed to buy from the pharmacist. She looked at Milo and said that it was his time to shine. She wasn't feeling well at all. She called Milo and he came to her, looking at her with concerned eyes. She stuck the note to his collar and barely walked to the door. She unlocked it and cracked it open. Milo looked at Chelsea one more time with sad eyes and stepped forward. "God help Milo," Chelsea said. Milo looked at her questioningly, as if he didn't know who or what God was, or simply didn't want to leave her alone. Chelsea looked at Milo as if it were the last time she'd see him, then closed the door. She had to muster all her strength to make it back to her bed. Finally there, she fell unconscious. Milo made his way down the stairs and jumped outside. Children were throwing stones into puddles, and when they noticed Milo, they ran to him. They thought he was let out to play and wanted to include him in their games, but Milo only looked at them and made his way around the noisy crowd. He remembered the command stamped in his mind, and he knew the scent that awaited him at the finish line. Milo walked by people's feet on the sidewalk. Most people already recognized him and weren't afraid of him. He made his way to the first set of traffic lights. There were 3 more ahead, but he made the trip without any problems. He was driven by instinct, and it helped him avoid dangerous obstacles. He noticed a familiar signboard on the horizon and recognized the scent coming from the place. Milo drooled as if he sensed food, but the place had something much more important than food. Something that would make his owner feel better. When Milo finally made it to the drugstore door, he scratched it with his paw. There were people walking back and forth inside, but the door had a sign. When Milo was here with Chelsea, he didn't see any signs. He tilted his head as if trying to read the sign. Nobody came out to him. He scratched the door once more. The sign said, "Closed." Milo waited for a long time, scratching the door once in a while to attract attention. He would have kept sitting there if not for the scent that caught his attention. It was a scent similar to what he smelled from the drugstore, but weaker. The scent was coming from someone who was standing across the street. The scent of medicine mixed with the scent of hot meat. Milo was unsure of what to do. Should he stay or go after the person who gave off the similar smell? Suddenly, the smell of hot meat increased, and he took off after the man. When he crossed the street, the man was far away. But Milo didn't need the man. He was after the scent of medicine similar to the one that came from the door. Alan Davis was a surgeon in a clinic and had enough work to do. He had a lot of patients that day. He was surprised at how many people injured themselves in such a small town. On one hand, the injuries weren't serious, but on the other hand, people ran to the hospital as soon as they sneezed. He often got so tired that he didn't even have the energy to eat his dinner. It was afternoon and Alan was outside getting some fresh air. He was looking at the gray sky and naked trees. Autumn was giving way to winter, but Alan didn't feel any emotions about it. Alan noticed the figure of his assistant across the street. He was being followed by a large dog that looked like a German shepherd, but smaller. The assistant made his way across to the other side of the street, and Alan asked him, "Chris, did you make new friends?" and laughed. "Excuse me, did you say something?" Chris asked, taking out his earphones. "Is that your dog?" "What?" "No," Chris said and walked into the clinic. Milo was confidently moving towards the door of the clinic. The scent of medicine brought him to the source. When the door suddenly closed in front of him, he got surprised and looked at Alan. He hadn't noticed Alan before. "Hey buddy, what's up?" Alan asked Milo. Milo replied with a short bark. "Well, I'm Alan Davis. Nice to meet you." Alan leaned in and stuck his hand out, to which Milo unexpectedly gave his paw, solidifying their new friendship. Milo looked at the door and then at the doctor, as if asking to be let in. He tilted his head to the side. "Sorry, bud. I can't let you in. We gotta keep the place sterile," the doctor smiled. Then he noticed something strange on Milo's collar. He looked closer and realized that it was a note wrapped in a plastic bag. Alan was intrigued. What could that be? He tried to pet the dog, and Milo accepted his petting with ease. Alan decided to get the note and read it. This is just a list of cheap medicines. So I'm guessing you were sent by the owner? Milo barked loudly and started wagging his tail energetically. And she probably can't come to this drugstore herself, huh? Well, my friend, you've come to the wrong place. This is not a drugstore, Alan said thoughtfully. Alan came to the medical field because he had always wanted to, but also because his father wanted him to continue the legacy. However, when he realized how tough the medical system was, he was disappointed. He was a talented surgeon and treated his patients with care. He was a very respected specialist in the clinic and greatly improved its reputation, but he would always argue with the bosses when patients could be treated using less expensive methods. He would have been fired a long time ago, but the bosses knew that he was bringing in a stable flow of money. Alan's personal life didn't work out well for him because nobody was interested in someone who was sick with altruism. Nevertheless, he had what everybody else had, a place to call home, a vacation once a year. But he had something that most people didn't, conscience. It was conscience that made him react at this particular moment too. Judging by the list of medicines, the owner of the dog was poor. Throughout his career, Alan has seen a lot of fates, which often were quite tragic. However, the experience didn't turn him into a cynical person. He quickly skimmed through the list again and made a mental note that the owner of the dog had a heart disease. It wouldn't hurt to call the cardiologist. Buddy, do you think you can take me back to your owner? I could help her out. Alan turned to Milo. He perked up and wagged his tail. Hold on a moment, the dog said and looked inside. His assistant, Chris, was waiting for him. I'm gonna be out for a while, Chris, Alan shouted and closed the door before he could say anything. Alan didn't have much money on him, but it was enough to buy all the medicines listed in the note. He bought other pills that were more effective and more expensive. He tied the bag with all the medicines to the dog's collar, thinking that's how it was supposed to be brought to the owner. As soon as Alan stuck the bag to the collar, Milo jogged along the sidewalk. Alan followed behind. Milo sensed that the dog was following him and didn't rush. Alan noted the exceptional intelligence of the dog that behaved in the city more civilized than some human beings. They had walked about an hour and the dog brought him to an apartment building that didn't really stand out a few miles from the clinic. Wow, you sure made a long journey to get to me, Alan said to Milo. Milo stopped in front of one entry and looked at Alan as if telling him to get the door. At that point, the boy came running and said, "Hey, Milo." The boy looked at Alan suspiciously and retreated back to the sandbox. "So, your name is Milo, huh? Alright, Milo, show me the way." Milo ran up the stairs and began scratching the door. "Let me try." Alan smiled and rang the doorbell. It didn't really give any results. The doorbell was broken and Alan knocked. He kept knocking but nobody answered. A thought flashed in his mind that he was too late. That would have been the worst turn of events for Alan. At some point, he heard some noises behind the door. The lock turned, and Alan heard some grumbles. It was a hoarse male voice. Milo growled, displeased. That's when Alan realized that Milo could be angry sometimes. The door opened, and an extremely unpleasant face was looking at Alan. He was a young guy, a lot younger than Alan, but booze made him look like he was old. The face looked swollen from constant drinking. Judging by the disheveled hair, he had woken up recently. His clothes were dirty and smelly, as if ignoring cleanliness was one of the life principles of the guy. The smell wafting from his mouth painted a complete picture for Alan. "What do you want?" he barked, forgoing any greeting. He hadn't noticed Milo yet. "Hello, for starters. I'm a doctor, here to see the patient." Alan decided to set boundaries because he knew that with these kinds of people, one needed to be polite but firm. "I didn't call anyone. You got the wrong door." "It was a woman who called," Alan said. "She's been sleeping all day. How could she call you?" the alcoholic insisted, not wanting to let him in. "She placed a call a few days earlier." "Why are you telling me these tales, man? I'm gonna call the cops." Alan expected this reaction. He was preparing himself for a lengthy debate and possibly a fight, but Milo stepped up at that moment and growled. "You stupid dog, where did you come from?" Colby's voice cracked from surprise, and he stumbled back into the apartment. Milo walked in, making it easier for Alan to deal with the situation. "Where is she?" Alan asked Colby. Colby just turned around and walked away into one of the rooms. Milo headed towards another. Alan looked around and saw dust, empty bottles. Everything reeked of poverty. It made sense why Colby had acted the way he did. The walls looked like they hadn't been tended to for 30 years. The wallpaper had faded and lost its initial colors. A thick layer of dust covered some areas. It was clear that the apartment's residents weren't able to keep the place clean. Alan approached her door and knocked. Having received permission, he entered. This room was much cleaner than the rest of the apartment, but the air was stale. The woman greeted him weakly. "Hello, I'm sorry for the mess. I just don't feel well enough to clean up right now. Milo, come down, baby." Chelsea was having a hard time keeping a whining Milo from licking her face. Milo seemed to say, "See, I made it. I made it." It was clear that Milo loved his owner with the affectionate and genuine love that only dogs can provide. "Hi, I'm Alan Davis. Milo and I met by chance. I'm a doctor." "I trained him to fetch me medicine, but never thought of inviting doctors." Chelsea smiled and petted Milo behind the ear, which made him even happier. "I'm Chelsea Leonard, doing what most retired people do, being sick." Chelsea looked quite ill, to say the least. Although Alan wasn't a cardiologist, her appearance suggested she needed hospitalization. Meanwhile, Chelsea opened the bag of medicines, her face contorted with concern. "Oh no, all these medicines are expensive. This is gonna make me go broke." "It's alright, Mrs. Leonard. This is on me, ma'am. You don't have to pay." "You better tell me what's going on. Unfortunately, I'm a surgeon, not a cardiologist, but still." Chelsea looked at Alan as if he was a saint, and Alan felt awkward. Chelsea began telling her long story. The more Alan listened, the more he felt sympathy for her. Although he didn't specialize in this field, things were still very serious. He realized he had arrived just in time. Chelsea finished telling her story, which had been difficult for her to share, and leaned back on the pillow. Alan had one question in his mind. Why didn't you get hospitalized? Chelsea quietly rolled her eyes and pointed in the direction of the noise. It sounded like the alcoholic was trying to get himself a drink. Alan's heart pounded with fury. He wanted to say something but remembered to be polite. "Alright, one problem at a time. Deal?" Chelsea nodded gratefully and smiled. "I'm gonna make a few calls and we'll get you to the cardiologist. You'll receive treatment and hopefully feel better." He dialed a doctor he knew. They weren't really good friends, but work united them. Among co-workers, Alan was known for his sense of fairness and honesty. "Palmer speaking," Alan heard on the other side. "Hey, Kevin, this is Alan." Alan explained Chelsea's situation and asked for help. "I know you like to make problems out of thin air, but I've never been part of them before." The colleague smirked. Alan managed to convince Kevin and arranged for Chelsea to be admitted to the hospital. "Alan, you owe me, man." Kevin hung up the phone. Alan turned to Chelsea and said, "Well, now we have to get you to the clinic. Do you need help to pack things up?" "What about Milo?" Chelsea's face looked concerned. "If you're okay with it, I can take him for the time being," the doctor offered. He liked Milo and would be happy to spend some time running with the dog in the park. "Mr. Davis, you're like an angel from above who came to my rescue. I don't know how I can repay you," Chelsea exclaimed sincerely. "I'm not sure we're angels, even though we do wear white gowns. As for repaying me, I'll accept your getting well. No questions asked." Alan smiled and started dialing a taxi. When the three of them were exiting the apartment, the stepson's face emerged from the room. "Where are you all going?" he asked, surprised. His face looked happier. He had probably found the magic water. "Colby, I'm going to the hospital," Chelsea told him. Alan was surprised at the compliant tone of her voice, considering Colby's behavior. "What hospital are you talking about, Mrs. Leonard? We barely have money for food. We're gonna die of hunger after the clinic." "Everything's gonna be alright," Chelsea smiled in response. "No, it's not. Who the heck is this guy? Is this even a doctor or a scammer playing a doctor?" "I'm not giving you the apartment." Colby began accusing them of conspiracy. "Forget about the apartment. Go hide in your room before I forget I'm a doctor and remember how much I hate alcoholics." The fury that had been building up in Alan upon seeing this despicable man began to spill out. He tried to keep it to himself and not let it out, but Colby's last words made him boil. It seemed that Colby understood the change in the mood of the once polite doctor and thought it was better to follow the doctor's advice. "You're gonna die, Mrs. Leonard." "That's even better for me." Colby slammed the door and disappeared. The taxi was waiting outside. It was a new car. "I'm a hobby driver, and I don't do this full time. I have my own business. I love my car, and unfortunately, I can't let your dog in my car, the driver announced. Well, then take the woman to the clinic, and Milo and I will take a walk. Do you mind, Mrs. Leonard? Alan asked and smiled. I think Milo likes you a lot, and he'd love to have a walk. I'll see you guys in the hospital, she replied weakly. I'll come by later. You can go ahead and get examined. Palmer is a good cardiologist and generally a positive guy. See you soon. Milo followed the departing car with his gaze and looked at Alan as if asking, So what now, human? Let's go for a walk? Alan asked, and they began to walk. Alan's home was quite far, and they made it there in the evening. They were both satisfied with the work they had completed during the day. They quickly had dinner and went to sleep. Milo was unpretentious when it came to food. He ate whatever Alan ate and lay spread out at his feet, knowing that his owner was probably doing well. Alan's actions didn't go unnoticed. He gave his boss a reason to deprive him of his monthly bonus for leaving the workplace in the middle of the day. Then, a long lecture on workplace discipline followed, which Alan listened to with an ironic smile, knowing that his leave at least saved someone's life. Meanwhile, the head doctor's constant drinking caused some incidents. Even his driver's license was suspended for 3 years despite connections in the police and the DMV. Despite losing the bonus and enduring the boring lecture from the hypocrite, Alan's mood didn't change, which made the head doctor mad. When Alan stepped out into the hallway, he caught sight of Kevin Palmer walking at the other end. Kevin saw him too and waved. Then they shook hands. Good deeds don't go unnoticed, Kevin smiled. Yeah, just got it confirmed, Alan replied. It's alright, I meant something else. Come, I'll show you. Kevin led Alan to the department and showed Chelsea's medical card. It showed complications upon complications. The cardiologist explained what caused what and talked about threats and dangers. Alright, Mr. Panic, make it shorter, please, Alan laughed. In short, you were just in time. A week later, she would be gone, Kevin finished. Alan felt a sense of pride. It felt good to do good. Alright, how much did everything cost? Alan asked. He knew that Chelsea had no relatives and friends. She had nobody to turn to for help, and therefore he decided to put her back on her feet. He was determined to cover all the costs. Meanwhile, Milo looked at his owner from the second floor. When their eyes met, Milo's ears perked up, and for Chelsea, it was like a balm to her soul. She hadn't seen Alan ever since she got in the taxi that day. It had been a week since then. Cardiologist Kevin thought that she might be Alan's relative or something. Chelsea had no idea what having relatives meant. Her parents had passed away early. She didn't really feel loved either. The relatives quickly forgot about her existence because they had enough of their own problems. People in the ward talked about the same things over and over, their own illnesses. Milo visited every day and sat outside her window or followed her commands. Chelsea would gesture and the intelligent Milo performed. This was a favorite pastime not only for them, but for other patients as well. At around 5 in the afternoon, Milo would leave, looking around guiltily. It was probably because Alan's shift was nearing its end and it was time to go home. Alan finally visited Chelsea at the end of the week. Her health was gradually improving. Chelsea was going through her old photos and remembering her past life. She didn't have many photographs, but they were so dear to her and replaced books for her. Each one had a history behind it. Hi, Mrs. Leonard. Do you still remember me? Alan greeted her. I don't think I will ever forget my guardian angel. Hi. Chelsea smiled softly, and Alan placed a bag with some sweets on the stand. How do you feel? Young and beautiful again? Everything is great. Did your stepson visit at least? Of course not. He's probably waiting for me to die finally. Well, not yet. Show me your photographs. Alan noticed the album. Oh, this is just a story of my life. I don't have many, but they're all mine. Chelsea blushed. It was something deeply personal for her, and the question caught her off guard. She never discussed the stories, even with her late husband. She was surprised Alan was interested. A particular photo caught Alan's attention, and he frowned. Stories, huh? Do you mind sharing one with me? To be honest, I've never shared my stories before, but I'm going to do it with you. You're such a kind-hearted person. Go ahead and choose the picture. Alan didn't really have a choice. His mind was concentrated on the photo from the moment he saw the album, and he pointed exactly at it. Chelsea turned pale because that was one of the most tragic stories in her life. Don't worry too much. If you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to. It's all right. I will tell you the story of this photo, Chelsea replied. Chelsea was a first-year student in medical school. She loved her studies, and the profession was very prestigious. She was a bright student and spent most of her time studying. Her friends always tried to make her go out and meet guys, but Chelsea was adamant, until one day when she met Carl. They met during their internship, and he was a geek like her. The only difference was that he studied therapy. They spent a lot of time together, and gradually their friendship turned into something bigger. That's how they started going out. Discussions of medical cases slowly turned to love poems, stargazing on the dorm roof, and the confession during the prom. After Carl's confession, Chelsea realized that she couldn't live without him. They loved each other, and that seemed to be the most important thing for the sweet couple. Later on, Carl introduced Chelsea to his parents. Carl's mother, Mrs. Tilson, didn't like Chelsea at all. The couple couldn't understand why. Carl's dad was more neutral, but he wasn't the leader in the family. Every time Mrs. Tilson had a chance, she commented that Chelsea was no match for Carl. They constantly had arguments about that. Once, Chelsea felt sick during her class. Judging by the symptoms, it was clear that it was toxicosis. She tested positive for pregnancy. At first, she was frightened. She didn't know what she was going to say to Carl. She was scared of giving birth and couldn't picture herself as a mother, although she had always wanted to understand what a happy family felt like. Carl wasn't afraid of anything at all. When he learned about the pregnancy, his eyes flashed with brightness. He didn't think about what was going to happen tomorrow or what obstacles were ahead of him when he became a father. As a future doctor, he knew all the medical aspects of being pregnant, but it wasn't his concern at all. The same evening, he broke the news to his parents. At first, it caused a commotion, but eventually they accepted his decision. But then, something surprising happened. Mrs. Tilson became so soft and nice to Chelsea, she was almost like a best friend to her. She helped Chelsea in any way she could and was with her all the time. She arranged appointments with the best gynecologist, picked a maternity hospital, and promised to provide her first grandchild with the best of things. Even when it was time to give birth, Mrs. Tilson took Chelsea to the hospital. During the birth, Chelsea lost consciousness. When she woke up, she realized she was in a totally different ward and under a drip. She didn't have the weight in her belly. She tried to move but couldn't. The nurse who was passing by at that time noticed that she was up and calmed her down. Chelsea fell asleep. When she woke up, Mrs. Tilson was sitting next to her. When Chelsea saw the familiar face, she burst into tears. But Mrs. Tilson's face was cold and pale, as if something bad had happened. She pierced Chelsea with her gaze for a long time, and then said, "Chelsea, the baby didn't make it. I had been telling you that you guys were no match from the get-go. Look what it brought us to. You were in a coma for several months, and they couldn't save the baby. It was born dead. I think you and Carl should break up. He's not having a good time because of what happened. He doesn't even want to see you. We covered all the bills for you, but you need to leave my son alone. You will find your man, believe me. I'm sorry, Chelsea. This is good for everyone. Goodbye." Mrs. Tilson exited the ward, and Chelsea had never seen her since then. "When I got back on my feet and returned to normal life, I dropped out and traveled around, trying to find my place under the sun. No matter how far I went, eventually I returned to my hometown. I married my widowed husband who was raising a child. Paul was a good husband and an honorable man. Don't judge him by Colby. He didn't take after his father at all. Mr. Davis, are you all right?" "You won't believe it, but I have a similar story," Alan began with a subdued voice. "The only difference is that during the birth, the mother died and I survived. My grandma, Mrs. Tilson, brought me home. My father was denied access to my mother. Grandma said that she was cremated. Dad raised me alone, which didn't hinder him from becoming an excellent physician. He never remarried. What would you say if I told you we should do a DNA test?" "What for?" "Well, compare our stories for any matches?" Alan smirked. "I'm inclined to think it's just a wild coincidence, but still, I will cover the expenses." "I don't mind at all," Chelsea replied calmly. Alan smoothly changed the topic. They talked about Milo's goofy pranks and his success in performing the commands that the doctor taught him and other details. This just kept them talking. Then they said goodbye, and Alan went home. On the way home, he dropped by a grocery store and bought some things for dinner and a bottle of whiskey. That night, He got drunk for the first time in his life. The man in the patient's photo that he saw back in the hospital was none other than Carl Davis, his father. Surprisingly, the first DNA test gave negative results, but it was not a rarity. Then, Alan ordered 3 more tests from 3 different companies. He had all the results in his room. The first envelope showed positive results. It felt like Russian roulette to him. The time he waited lasted forever, and there he was, looking at the last 2 envelopes that 2 people's fates depended on. For some time, Alan couldn't make himself open the envelopes. He was just looking out through the window. The overcast sky was sharing the first snow with the ground. The doctor was scared of both outcomes. If Chelsea turned out to be his mother, then his grandma would have broken 3 lives. His father's, and his mother's. If not, then his last hopes to figure out his mother's fate would be broken. Finally, he opened the envelopes. Mom. Davis speaking. Hey, Dad. Still haven't saved my number? Hey, Alan. What's up, son? Yeah, I can't figure out this darn thing. How are you? Better than anyone. And you know why? You son of a gun. Why? Dad, if you're standing, please take a seat. Okay, done. Are you getting married or something? No, Dad. I found Mom. Then there was silence, followed by shock and a hasty narration of how a dog named Milo and its adventure connected the lost souls that were unjustly thrown apart. Despite happening at the dusk of their lives, Chelsea and Carl finally reclaimed what they had lost 40 years ago. The family reunited. The father, mother, and son were happy despite the bitterness of the years they lived apart. Chelsea was getting healthy fast, and only after she was discharged did Alan decide to tell her the truth. And then she met Carl. There were a lot of tears and hugs. It felt as if Carl and Chelsea had never broken up all those years and were just away from each other on a business trip. Since then, the Davis family's favorite pastime was walking in the park, and their route was determined by the dog named Milo. As for Colby, he partially got what he wanted because Chelsea moved to her husband's house, but he wasn't happy in the apartment for too long. He managed to get caught robbing again and went to jail. Thank you for listening to this story. What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments. Bella was awakened by the sound of a doorbell ringing. It was early morning and she wasn't expecting anyone. As she got out of bed and opened the door, she didn't immediately recognize her childhood friend. She looked up and down at a tall young woman wearing a somewhat short skirt for casual attire. Bella tried to figure out why the face seemed so familiar. She couldn't quite identify who she was. The face felt familiar, yet it had changed significantly. The woman was cradling something in her arms. "Are you gonna let me in or what?" The friend giggled, looking tired. "Oh, of course, sorry. Come in." Sonia walked inside, her high heels clicking on the floor. She placed her bundle on the sofa. "My arms are killing me." The bundle suddenly started moving, and a cry emanated from it. Bella stood up and approached. "Is that a baby?" Sonia lit up a cigarette and said, "A work of art named Leah." Bella immediately began waving the smoke away with her hands. "Are you out of your mind? Go smoke on the porch now. There's a baby here, for heaven's sake." Sonia smiled and said, "Nothing's changed at all. You're still as righteous and boring as ever." Sonia went to the porch and smoked, watching through the window as Bella carefully unwrapped the baby and let her get some fresh air. As she spoke affectionately to the baby, Leah cooed and calmed down. When Sonia returned from outside after smoking 3 cigarettes in a row, she didn't smell pleasant. Bella stood up, opened the window, and looked at her disapprovingly. "How are you feeding her?" Sonia dismissed it with a wave of her hand, as if it wasn't important. "There's a bottle in the bag." Bella quickly prepared some porridge and changed Leah's clothes, which she found in the bag. "It's chilly outside. You need to keep her warm and fed." "Don't worry. She's a strong girl." Bella realized that Sonia hadn't just dropped by for a few minutes. Since it was still dark outside, she prepared a bed for the little one. The baby was already drifting off to sleep, even though she hadn't eaten much. When Leah fell asleep, Bella put the bottle away and gestured for Sonia to join her in the kitchen. "Well, you must be hungry too, friend. Let me make you some coffee and a sandwich. I want to know how exactly you ended up here." They sat in the kitchen, and Sonia began to talk. I trusted him. I confided in him completely. And he was... married? No, it's not that. He was different at first, but he changed. After I gave birth, he said that I'm supposed to stay at home with the baby and take care of her. I mean, that's basically the end of it for me. I need a life. Why would I want to sit at home and do nothing? To be completely honest, he just wasn't the right guy for me, and I just left. It turned out becoming a mother wasn't as easy as I'd expected. But you know me, I can handle anything. Of course I do. So what's next now? As far as I remember, you sold your parents' house. Well, I'm in no rush, so I'll take my time and think about it. Can I stay with you for a couple of days? Of course, you can stay as long as you want. And you still haven't had a boyfriend, huh? Sonia suddenly asked. Bella smiled. Yeah, I guess I'm not destined or something. So, what do you do for a living? Sonia continued questioning. I do accounting for a few companies. Sonia looked around and asked further. Do you work from home? As they say these days, remotely? Bella laughed. That's exactly the term. I mean, I can work anytime, anywhere, so that's a good plus. Good job, but I don't get why you're still single though. I can't believe guys are missing out on such a trustworthy person like you. I've tried with some guys. I didn't like it. Well, I think you should try harder, Sonia smiled. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. Bella was busy tending to Leah, and she did it with great pleasure. Meanwhile, Sonia went through ads in the newspapers and made some calls. On the 3rd day, Sonia sat next to Bella, who was taking care of the little baby. I see you're enjoying your time with Leah. Of course. Look at her. She's such a cutie. How can you not enjoy taking care of this bundle of happiness? Bella, listen. I've got nobody else to turn to about this. I don't really have any relatives, except for my aunt who hates my guts. Bella looked at her as if sensing she couldn't bring herself to ask for something. What is it, Sonia? I'll do what I can. I got a really important job offer. It's a nice company, and I want to take the job. So, what's the problem? Take it. The thing is, it's in the city. I can't imagine myself in the city with a baby. I can't work like that. I just need 1 month to get settled, find a place to live, and a nanny who can take care of Leah. Do you think I can leave Leah with you for a month? I mean, you work from home, and can you please help me out? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me. Bella was absolutely confused, struggling to find the right words to say. Sonia, I just don't see how that would be possible. She's your daughter. And that's exactly who I'm taking care of, Sonia interrupted, and asking you to help me take care of Leah. I hope you understand that it's impossible for me to run around in the city with a baby. I can't afford a nanny at this point either. And you're just naturally so good with her. As soon as I get settled, I'll come back and take her. I'll be calling you guys every day, don't worry. By this time, Bella had spent a few hours around Leah. She had already grown attached to the baby, and a strong bond had formed between them. Bella felt as though she was meant to be part of this child's life, and now she was being offered the opportunity to play a significant role in it. At first, Bella hadn't even noticed the subtle ways in which she was being persuaded to take care of Leah. The discussions about her mother's unpredictable future, the emphasis on Leah's well-being, and the hints that Bella's presence could provide stability for the child all played a part in slowly convincing her. Perhaps deep down, Bella knew that she was the best option for Leah. Her own instincts had been stirred by the baby's presence, and she felt an innate desire to protect and nurture her. As the idea settled into her mind, Bella couldn't shake the feeling that this was the right decision for both of them. When the time came to officially agree, Bella didn't hesitate. The love and affection she felt for Leah overflowed as she held the baby in her arms. She promised to do everything in her power to ensure that Leah would be in a safe and loving environment. Bella knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but she was committed to giving Leah her best. With each day, her love for the child only grew stronger, and she found herself constantly learning and adapting to the needs of her new role as a caregiver. Only a week after embracing the role of Leah's caregiver, Bella found that the sensation of motherhood had a profoundly positive impact on her well-being. It filled her with a happiness that she had never experienced before, and she was astonished by how this newfound joy had remained hidden within her for so long. Every time Bella approached Leah, the baby would greet her with a warm, bright smile, even while drifting in and out of sleep. Leah's cheerful disposition seemed to radiate throughout the room, and Bella couldn't help but feel a deep sense of connection with the child. Leah was an incredibly serene baby, which made it easy for Bella to balance her new responsibilities with her work. As the days went by, their bond grew stronger, and Bella found herself cherishing every moment spent with the little girl. However, as Bella's attachment to Leah deepened, she couldn't ignore the unsettling knowledge that she would eventually have to return the baby to her mother. This thought loomed over her like a dark cloud, casting a shadow on the otherwise blissful experience of caring for Leah. Despite this nagging feeling, Bella resolved to make the most of their time together. She focused on creating a nurturing environment for Leah, offering her unwavering love and support. Bella knew that eventually, the day would come when they would have to part ways. But until that moment arrived, she would continue to pour her heart and soul into raising Leah, ensuring that the baby would always know the warmth of her love. Sonia called exactly 1 month after leaving Leah with Bella. "Bella, that job didn't work out. They weren't what I expected them to be. I've already found a different job and got paid. I'm gonna send you some money. So, how are you both doing?" "Everything's alright. Leah's trying to sit up, and we've already tried puree." "I'll call you back, Bella." Sonia hung up the phone abruptly, not even sounding interested in hearing what else Leah had learned. Bella's phone buzzed, displaying an incoming money transfer, a decent amount too. "We're gonna get a stroller. Do you want to get a stroller, baby? Yeah? You want to ride in a stroller?" Bella decided to spend the money Sonia had transferred on a stroller. It was a timely purchase that greatly improved their lives. They often went for walks in the park, especially in good weather. After 2 more months had passed, Sonia called Bella again, sending her additional money to help care for Leah. As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Bella noticed a change in their communication. Sonia's calls became less frequent, replaced by simple money transfers and brief messages updating Bella about her various struggles, finding a new job, meeting someone who was unaware of Leah's existence, and offering other explanations for her continued absence. In truth, Bella didn't mind the lack of communication from Sonia. She was even somewhat relieved that Leah's mother wouldn't be returning anytime soon. Bella was afraid that if Sonia came back to reclaim Leah, she would lose not only the happiness she had found in caring for the baby, but also the heartwarming moments spent holding Leah close, humming lullabies, and feeling their unique bond grow stronger. As time went on, however, even the money transfers ceased. Sonia seemed to have vanished entirely. No more calls or messages provided any insight into her whereabouts or her intentions for Leah. Bella couldn't help but feel a mixture of concern for Sonia and an underlying sense of relief, as this development seemed to solidify her role in Leah's life. One day, Bella took Leah to the doctor. "Well, what can I say? I don't see anything critical. As for her getting sick easily, it's the immune system. Take her to the sea. Even once a year is enough to help her stay healthy." Bella said goodbye to the doctor and took Leah by the hand as they walked home. Lately, Leah had been catching colds often. Even an open window for fresh air could make her nose run. Bella thought about what the doctor had said. Take her to the sea. She realized she would need papers to fly in an airplane because she wasn't the mother. That's when Bella stopped in her tracks. "Mommy, what's wrong?" "Leah, sweetie, do you want to see the ocean?" "Yes. What is the ocean?" Bella laughed. "You'll see what it is when we get there." "Where is it, Mommy?" "It's very far away, baby girl. Do you want to go on a road trip?" "Yes, Mommy, yes." As they walked, Bella smiled. They couldn't fly to Spain, but they could plan a trip within the country. A week later, Bella and Leah were on their way to California to see the ocean. Leah looked out the window, exclaiming, "Mommy, the trees are running past us." Bella laughed, replying, "That's us driving fast, baby." Leah kept asking questions, seemingly unconcerned with the answers. The West Coast greeted them with breathtaking beauty. Leah was awestruck by the vast ocean horizon. She gazed at it for a few minutes before taking a deep breath. "Mommy, it's beautiful." It wasn't just beautiful, it was enchanting. The stunning sunset, the water's shimmering surface, and the serene yet majestic ocean created an unforgettable scene. It seemed as if time had stopped, allowing people a moment to pause and look around. "Yeah, it is beautiful indeed," Bella agreed. A man nearby, watching the water with a faint smile, caught her attention. When Leah noticed a girl her age next to the man, she ran up to her, and they raced towards the water's edge. The man approached Bella, introducing himself. "Hi, I'm Rob. We just got here too, and can't tear ourselves away from the scenery to go back to the hotel." Bella laughed, wondering how the man figured out they had arrived recently too. "How did you know we just got here?" "Well, this sunset strikes everyone the hardest the first time they see it. The emotions from the experience are never the same after that, because once you've seen it, you've seen it. But the first time, whew, it blows minds." Bella stood there speechless as the girls raced back towards them. In their haste, they nearly knocked both Bella and the man off their feet. Bella's instincts kicked in as she reached out to catch Leah, while the man did the same for his daughter. As the dust settled, they found themselves frozen in place, staring at one another in disbelief. Bella's expression grew serious as she studied the young girl in the man's arms and then looked back at Leah. The man appeared to be equally taken aback by the situation. The two girls were the spitting image of one another, the only distinction between them being the outfits they wore. The uncanny resemblance between the children raised a flurry of questions in Bella's mind. Were the girls related? Could they be twins separated under mysterious circumstances? The situation seemed too extraordinary to be a mere coincidence. As Bella and the man exchanged puzzled glances, they knew they needed to unravel the mystery behind the striking similarity. "Daddy, I'm hungry," the man's daughter chimed in. "Mommy, I'm hungry too," Leah echoed. Bella's voice was shaky as she responded, "Yes, honey, let's go get something to eat." They all began to move, preparing to head back to the hotel. Before they parted ways, the man stopped Bella and inquired about their room number. "I'm in room 410. I think we need to talk. Can I wait for you on the patio?" he asked. Bella nodded in agreement, her mind racing with uncertainty about what was to come. She hurried back to the hotel, her thoughts consumed by the inexplicable situation. Sonia had never mentioned another child, and the idea that there could be another girl who looked just like Leah seemed utterly perplexing. Once inside the hotel, Bella took a deep breath to calm her nerves. She got some food for Leah and put her to bed, watching as the little girl drifted off to sleep almost immediately. With Leah tucked in for the night, Bella knew it was time to confront the mystery head-on. She gathered her thoughts and made her way to the patio. Rob was already waiting, smoking a cigarette and gazing at the horizon. When Bella approached, he quickly extinguished the cigarette and threw the butt in the trash can. "Sorry, I had quit smoking, but I couldn't contain myself today." He took a moment before speaking again. "So, I'm guessing we both know Sonia, huh?" When Bella heard the name Sonia, all her hopes that this was just a simple coincidence crumbled at that moment. "Yes, she's my friend. It's been 5 years since I last heard from her. She left Leah for months and never returned." "Yeah, she'd always dreamed of a big city life. I was madly in love with her. I really hoped we could build a family, but Sonia, she's just... I don't know how to explain it. There was so much mystery in her that made her extremely attractive to men, but she chose a different life. She chose to stay mysterious. Sonia left me when I suspected she was pregnant. I searched for her for 2 years but found Christine instead. It wasn't hard to convince the orphanage. The DNA test did its job. I still wish to find Sonia, but this time to tell her how much I've come to hate her." "Are you saying that she only took one of the babies?" Bella asked. "She did, and now I know why." Christine was born with a heart disease. Sonia didn't want to deal with a sick baby. Bella's eyes filled with concern, but Rob quickly reassured her that things were fine now. Christine has had a few surgeries and she can't fly for now, and that's actually why we're here. Other than that, she's absolutely healthy. Bella and Rob stayed up late talking, not noticing as the sky began to lighten. Before saying goodbye, Rob took Bella's hand and said, "I can see how worried you are. Trust me, I'm not a monster, and I won't take Leah away from you. I can see how attached you two are and how much she loves you. Let's just relax these 2 weeks and enjoy our stay. Something will become clear, and if not, we can always sit and talk in the end. All I ask is that you don't avoid us, please." Bella smiled through her tears. "Thank you. To be honest, I was thinking about running away, even though it's not a good idea." Bella had initially entertained thoughts of leaving and putting the strange encounter with the man behind her, fearing that he might try to take Leah away. However, after their conversation on the patio, she felt somewhat reassured. It appeared that Rob was just as bewildered by the situation as she was, and his genuine concern for the welfare of both girls was evident. That being said, Bella couldn't bring herself to trust Rob entirely. The questions surrounding the girls' resemblance were still unanswered, and the stakes were too high for her to let her guard down completely. Despite his seemingly good intentions, Bella knew that she needed to remain cautious in her dealings with Rob. Her priority was to protect Leah and ensure her well-being. As Bella navigated this unexpected turn of events, she found herself wrestling with a mix of emotions. While she was relieved to have someone else who understood the gravity of the situation, she couldn't help but feel anxious about the uncertainty that lay ahead. The search for answers would undoubtedly be a complicated process, and Bella knew she had to prepare herself for the challenges and revelations that would come with it. She vowed to stay vigilant and focused, determined to safeguard Lisa's happiness and security no matter what the truth might bring. Surprisingly, the girls spent most of their time together, building sandcastles, swimming, and soon even having breakfast together. Bella watched with amazement at how similar they were, even in their gestures and mannerisms. As a result, Bella and Rob spent a lot of time together too. They talked about everything, and at times Bella couldn't fathom how Sonia could leave such a good man behind. Rob was the perfect man, dedicated to family and willing to go to great lengths to provide for it. But most importantly, Rob seemed genuine. Despite his rugged and imposing appearance, he seemed kind-hearted, especially when they rescued the sea turtle together. They all celebrated the rescue, and after an exhausting day and a delicious dinner, the girls fell asleep in Bella's room. Robert and Bella sat on the patio, deep in conversation. He was a true gentleman, courteous and attentive. It had been a long time since Bella had felt so cared for and valued. They stayed up late again, and Bella only returned to her room in the morning. The girls were sound asleep, and Bella lay down next to them. She found it difficult to fall asleep, consumed by worry and fear. "What have I done?" Bella kept asking herself, berating herself for her actions. The thoughts of everything Robert had told her about Leah and Sonia kept replaying in her mind. She was worried about the fact that she never went looking for Sonia. In fact, she secretly wished she would never return. She kept trying to convince herself that what she had done was okay. Amidst all the negative thoughts, the image of Robert saying kind words to Bella and smiling was one thing that brought a smile to her face. In the morning, she was awakened abruptly. Robert and the girls were standing there. "Bella, I think we need to talk," Robert said. "What? What's going on?" Bella asked, bewildered and still groggy from sleep. As she considered what could be happening, her heart raced with fear. She dreaded the worst, that he would announce he was taking Leah. Bella's mouth hung open, waiting for Robert to say the words. At that moment, the girls started jumping up and down on the bed. "Yes, yes, yes," they shouted excitedly. In 3 days, Bella, Leah, Robert, and Christine set off on a new journey together. Their first stop was Rob's place, where they would spend some time getting to know each other better and adjusting to their life as a family. During their stay, the girls grew even closer, their bond strengthening day by day. It was a heartwarming sight to see the sisters playing, laughing, and discovering their shared interests. Once they were settled in at Rob's place, they began making plans to visit Bella's town. Rob wanted to ensure that everything was in order regarding Leah's paperwork and legal matters. As they handled the paperwork and met with lawyers, Bella felt a mixture of relief and gratitude. Robert's support and understanding had made this process much easier than she had anticipated. She realized Rob's intentions were pure, and she somewhat felt guilty for feeling cautious about him. Bella knew that the decision to keep Leah close to her sister was the right one. She could see the happiness that their connection brought to both girls, and it filled her heart with joy. In the end, the family decided to split their time between Bellastown and Rob's place, allowing the girls to maintain their relationships with both communities. Through it all, Bella and Robert continued to grow closer, their shared love for the girls and their commitment to providing a loving, stable home for them, forging a strong bond between them. As the days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, it became clear that this new family was meant to be. Together, they faced the challenges and joys of life, united by their love and dedication to the happiness of Leah and Christine.
Hello, welcome to the channel Wise Stories. Enjoy watching.
Sebastian, a wealthy entrepreneur and respected person in the city, was standing outside the courthouse with Laura, his ex-wife, saying goodbye forever. Today they got divorced. He looked at the woman one last time. She was damn beautiful, well-dressed, and not too mean. They could still live together. But their life together was not happy. There was no love between them. Maybe if they'd had children, they would have played the role of a family. But they had no children, so they did not live as a family, but rather as roommates. Over the years, communication between them was reduced to phrases, "Are you hungry? How's it going? Is everything okay?" The man laughed faintly and said, "Well, I guess goodbye, Laura. I wish you happiness. I'm sorry it happened this way. We tried to create a real family, but it didn't work out." The woman replied seriously, "Yes, you're right. We only torment each other. We should not have got married at all, but our parents insisted on that. Good luck, Sebastian. Maybe you will meet someone else, true love. But after all these years you have not forgotten Mariana, you still love her. I have always felt that. It was as if she was invisibly between us. That's probably why things didn't work out between us." Sebastian answered irritably, "Don't mention Mariana, I beg you. You know, it's a sensitive subject for me. Well, I have to go. I have a lot of work to do. I sincerely wish you all the best, Laura." That's how easily and effortlessly the couple, who had lived together for 10 years, separated for good. In the evening, Sebastian decided to meet his old friend, Adrian, for a heart-to-heart talk in a cafe. Sebastian was depressed that night. He was supposed to be happy, now he was single. He could do whatever he wanted, and nobody would have looked at him reproachfully and demanded his constant attention. But he was in no mood at all. After drinking some alcohol and eating a delicious, spicy pizza, Adrian said, "To be honest, Sebastian, I don't understand you. Why did you suddenly decide to divorce Laura? She's a good woman, a great housewife. I've visited you often, and I've tasted her food. God gave her both beauty and intelligence. I don't understand what you've been missing. Do you think you'd be better off alone?" The man sighed and shrugged. "I don't know, maybe not better, but at least we don't have to pretend to be a family. The truth is, we were never really a family. It was a show that lasted for years, a show we tried to believe in. Laura and I were strangers from the beginning, you know? Nothing has changed in all these years. When I think of my Mariana, my heart beats differently. That was real love, everything inside was singing. I wanted to hug her, kiss her, and make her happy. With Laura, it had never felt like this. Intimacy was like an obligation. No pleasure." Adrian kept wondering, why did you even think of her? It was the first love, it's the most vivid feeling for many people. I often quarrel with my Sabrina, and sometimes I'm ready to kill her. But you're right, we have 2 teenage children, we have no choice, so we live together because of them, like everyone else. Sebastian continued, "Exactly. Like everyone else. And I don't want to be like everyone else. God has not given us children, and we have no common interests. It's a boring routine, not life. If only Mariana had given me a baby. I'd be the happiest person in the universe, raising a son or daughter. Wow, so many years have passed since that tragedy, and you still love Mariana. Life is such a strange thing. I feel so sorry for the girl. She died in such a horrible way. She was so young. Let's drink to her. God rest her soul. They drank in silence, spent some more time in the cafe, talking about life, and then went home. Sebastian went into the apartment, which had suddenly become cold and empty without Laura. He sat down in a chair, took an album of old photographs, and began to go through them, remembering every episode of his life. Sebastian's parents were wealthy and powerful people. His mother was the CEO of a shoe factory, and his father was a criminal lawyer. His services cost a lot of money, and everything was scheduled for a year in advance. So the boy's childhood and youth were wonderful. He had the best of everything: branded clothes, lessons with the best teachers, high-quality expensive food, and a vacation in a tropical paradise abroad twice a year. At the same time, Sebastian's father didn't let the boy relax. He was a strict father. And his mother often took him to work, showing him how she and her subordinates worked. His mother hoped that her son would also join her business when he grew up. Sebastian studied well and made his parents happy. After school, he followed in his mother's footsteps and started his own business, manufacturing and selling branded leather shoes. He didn't waste his time on mass production of poor quality shoes. It was expensive products of excellent quality. This is probably why, over the years, his business got so many loyal customers from among the wealthy people of the city. He managed to survive the crisis and did not go bankrupt. Although it was very difficult, many people knew and respected him as a professional in his field. Sebastian met his first and only love, Mariana, by chance when he stayed overnight at a hotel on vacation. Mariana worked there as a maid. Sebastian was getting ready to leave, but he decided to take a shower as it would be a long and exhausting trip. When he got out of the shower in just his underwear, wiping himself with a towel and singing his favorite song, he saw the maid with a vacuum cleaner, who couldn't hear him. The guy coughed loudly. The poor girl, seeing him half naked, blushed like a boiled lobster, jumped up, and then began to move back and apologize. "Oh, my gosh. How embarrassing. I am so sorry. I was told to go and clean this room. I thought you'd already left. I knocked for a long time, but nobody opened the door. I'll leave right away. I'm really sorry. I'm just new here. I must have mixed up something." Sebastian laughed. The situation was indeed funny. He said cheerfully, "Don't worry about it. It's all right. It happens. My name is Sebastian. What's yours? I did not know that such fragile pretty girls can work as maids. It's a hard job, all day on your feet." And so they began to communicate. This young, petite, modest girl charmed him from the start. It was as if a spark flashed between them. The attraction was mutual. She looked at him in such a way, her gaze was burning him. Sebastian and Mariana became friends, and initially, he visited her in her hometown, and a couple of months later he took Mariana to his city. He admired her strength of character. Mariana had been an orphan, grew up in an orphanage, and had suffered a lot there. Not all adults would be able to go through what she went through as a child. She had no parents, not even those who drank, and no other relatives. She was left at the gates of the orphanage when she was a baby, as if she was an unwanted kitten. After graduation, she studied by correspondence to become a teacher and had a part-time job at a hotel. She had to earn some money for a living. At the same time, she was positive, easygoing, and smiling. The love between them burst out like a flame, almost instantly. It would seem that there is nothing special about her, small, skinny, with a delicate voice. They don't make movies or sing songs about girls like that. But a boy's heart raced like crazy in his chest when he touched her. Everything inside was on fire. He would just pick her up and whirl her around. She knew Sebastian was not a poor man, but she never asked for anything, not even a bit. To her, he was just a knight who, like in a fairy tale, appeared out of nowhere and saved the princess from imprisonment, falling in love with her. Sebastian was still studying at the University of Economics and was gradually learning the basics of business. He was so excited, and one day he invited his beloved home to meet his parents. For some reason, he was sure his mother would like Mariana because she was so wonderful. At first, the parents were friendly and nice, but they asked too many simple but tricky questions. His father was especially good at this. Slowly sipping his wine, he asked, "Mariana, where do you like to spend your vacation? Here in the South, or do you prefer exotic countries? And where do you work? Or are you getting a university degree? At what university, if it's not a secret?" Mariana behaved modestly, in a simple way, trying to keep her mouth shut. She answered quietly and briefly, afraid to say too much. She knew she had nothing much to brag about. But when she told them she was an orphan and had been raised in an orphanage, Sebastian's mother changed her face in an instant. Mariana felt that she was no longer wanted in this house. The small talk continued, and his father smiled faintly. But when Sebastian went to see his girlfriend off, she suddenly burst into tears like a baby in the entryway. The boy was confused and hugged her. "Why are you crying, sweetie? Come here, got overexcited?" Mariana sobbed. "They didn't like me, I know. Will you leave me now? It's all over between us, isn't it?" Sebastian smiled, stroking her hair. "Don't talk nonsense. No matter what my parents say, remember that I love you and I won't give up on you. I swear. How will I survive without my little girl?" Mariana wiped away her tears, smiled, and calmed down a little. She loved Sebastian so much that she couldn't imagine her life without him. After she left, a scandal broke out in the house. His mother yelled, "Son, are you out of your mind? Why are you hanging out with this lowlife? She has nothing. Is this the daughter-in-law we dreamed of? What kind of future do you have with her? Your university friend, Laura, that's the kind of girl you need. Beautiful, well-educated. She's the daughter of a businessman. She speaks 3 languages. What's so great about that penniless skinny orphan Mariana?" Sebastian was also furious. "Do you think that if she is an orphan, she is a bad person? And we can't love each other because of that? How can you be so cruel, mother? Do you even know how hard it is for her? She's all alone in this world. And Laura is just a friend. I don't love her at all. I don't even like her as a girl." Then his father joined the conversation. Being a lawyer, he reasoned pragmatically. "Let's say you're in love. So what? Is she going to live here, with us? No, dear, it won't work that way. If you're an adult and our opinion means nothing to you, then provide for yourself and live with your orphan wherever you want. But without my money, okay?" Sebastian was boiling with rage. "Well, fine, I'll go and pack. I won't be lost without you. All the best. I thought you would support me and accept Mariana, but you." The guy rented an inexpensive, small, old, but pretty cozy house on the outskirts of the city and moved there with Mariana. It was just the two of them. He had an entrepreneurial spirit even then. He started selling clothes and shoes. He worked hard to provide for his sweetheart. Those were the best memories of his life. What a good time they had together. Mariana, despite her young age and lack of experience, turned out to be very clever. She learned how to cook, run her household, and continue her studies. Sebastian, as a responsible man, forbade her to work as a maid because now he was the head of the family and it was his responsibility now. His beloved did not argue with him, obeyed him in everything, and idolized him. They had such hot nights together. They could love each other until dawn. Tenderness and passion literally flooded them both. He saved up some money and gave Mariana a handmade silver bracelet with hearts for her birthday. Unfortunately, he didn't have enough money for gold. She was over the moon and whispered to him softly, "Sebastian, you are the best. I love you so much. No one has ever given me anything like this. With you, I feel like I'm in a fairy tale. The couple planned to get married soon and have a modest wedding. They decided to invite his parents despite their conflicts. When Sebastian's mother heard the news, she flatly refused to go. Father only frowned and kept silent. The woman yelled at her husband, "Why did you put your head down and didn't say a word? Go, live as you wish, son. And now what? Be happy with your orphan daughter-in-law. She'll get pregnant before you know it, and then it'll be too late to do anything about it. Well, you're a respected lawyer, and you have connections. Do something." Terrible grief rushed into Sebastian's life unexpectedly and turned his whole life upside down. That fateful night, he worked as a part-time courier after classes and delivered goods to different addresses, as usual. For some reason, he could not get Mariana on the phone, though this had never happened before. She always answered the phone right away. Some kind of anxiety plagued him throughout the evening. He was nervous. What's the matter? Mariana was always home in the evening. She never went anywhere without me. And her phone is always with her. Did something happen? When his shift was finally over, he immediately rushed home. Not far from his house, the man noticed 2 fire trucks, police, and an ambulance. There was black acrid smoke all around. The house was almost burned out. The guy panicked and began to break through the cordons and the crowd of people from all the neighboring streets. He shouted, "Mariana, my fiancée is there. Did you save her? What has happened? Where is she? I'm coming to you. Hold on." They kept telling him, "You can't go there. The house burned to the ground. No one survived. The wiring must have been old, so it shorted out. We checked, and there's no one alive or dead. We're very sorry for your loss." When the fire was extinguished, Sebastian ran into the yard. Everything was black, mixed with ash, foam, and water. In the hallway, there were Mariana's burnt slippers and the remains of her warm sweater, which she always wore at home. The boy wandered through the charred wooden wreckage as if in a daze and shouted, "Mariana, where are you, darling? Answer me. I don't believe you're dead. Don't leave me, do you hear? I will die without you." He cried, screamed, howled, and rolled around on the dirty, charred boards, completely mad with grief. By then Sebastian's father drove up and, witnessing this terrible scene, anxiously asked the policeman, "God, has he lost his mind? Why is he acting this way? How can we bring him to his senses?" The man sighed and answered, "He's in shock. The brain denies what happened, you know? It's a normal defensive reaction. It will pass in time. Take him away. Try not to talk about it, distract him. Time heals. I'm so sorry for your loss." The father quietly approached the boy. "Son, can you hear me? It's me, your father, let's go home. You can't bring her back." When Sebastian saw his father, he became furious and attacked him with his fists. "It's all your fault. You and Mom. You did it, didn't you? You hated her. Are you happy now? Mariana died." And the boy laughed hysterically. He crossed himself and said, "What are you talking about, son? Are you out of your mind? We didn't like your fiancée, but we didn't want that poor girl to die. Stop it. I know you loved her, and you're suffering right now. But your mother and I would never do that. Don't accuse us of such terrible things. The fireman already told me it was an accident. The old damn wiring shorted out. The fireman already told me it was an accident. The old wiring shorted out. Damn it. Come on, there's nothing more to do here." The body was never found, so Mariana had not yet been declared dead. Sebastian immediately went to the police and filed a missing persons report. At the police station, he filled out a couple of forms and attached photos of his beloved. The policeman put all the data into the database, and that was the end of the story. Time passed, and Sebastian constantly inquired how the search was going, but the investigator tiredly replied, "We are still searching. Don't worry, we'll find her." After that, they gave him a piece of paper declaring Mariana missing, and in a few years, she would be declared dead. Sebastian accepted her death inwardly. Marina just couldn't leave him, only death could separate them forever. Sebastian totally isolated himself, shut himself off from everyone. He had almost no contact with his parents. After classes at the university, he went to his room, locked the door, played Mariana's favorite song, put on headphones, and cried silently, remembering how happy they were. He covered all the walls with her pictures. At that critical moment, when Sebastian did not want to live, Laura supported him greatly. She visited him often. They would stay in his room and talk for a long time. Sebastian needed to tell someone how much he loved Mariana. Laura listened to him devotedly, never interrupted, and was sympathetic. She tried to distract him somehow. Sometimes she asked for help with a science project or asked him to fix a broken computer, or suddenly she had an extra ticket to the cinema and didn't have anyone to go with. Sebastian's parents were happy and supported Laura in every way. They were happy for them to be together because they were afraid their son would go absolutely crazy with grief if he were alone. So, Sebastian and Laura didn't notice that they became very close. It happened at her birthday party when all the guests had already left. There were no declarations of love, but Laura, having drunk some champagne for courage, started kissing him, and Sebastian, also being drunk, silently threw her on the bed. Sebastian had no feelings for Laura. He did not even hide it. Did Laura love him? Who knows? Perhaps she had been convinced of it by everyone around her. Her parents insisted, saying, "Don't waste time thinking about it. He's a good guy. And he has a great family. Sebastian is a decent man." Her friends also kept telling her, "Laura, don't wait. Just take things into your own hands. Otherwise, your Sebastian will be stolen by other girls. He's a handsome, promising, intelligent guy." The truth was that both before and after the wedding, Sebastian and Laura remained just friends. There was not that warmth and passion between them. It is terrible to think about it, but even in bed Sebastian imagined that Laura was his Mariana, and that was the only way he could get pleasure and relaxation. Laura wanted a baby so badly, but she couldn't get pregnant. She was very worried and constantly visited doctors. And Sebastian was even glad in his heart that they had no children. If Mariana had given him a baby, he would be very happy, but now, many people envied them: a beautiful house, enough money, peaceful life, and no scandals. People just didn't realize that there were no scandals because everyone had their own life. They were strangers. They didn't even have anything to talk about. That is why divorce was inevitable, even though many couples live their lives that way, just out of habit. After the divorce, 8 years flew by like a day. During this time, Sebastian had many women around, and all of them wanted to have fun with such a pleasant man, especially since he was the CEO of a big company. But usually, he did not let anyone close to him. He was incredibly bored with them. They were all the same, even behaved the same, just beautiful dolls with long artificial eyelashes, nothing more. That morning Sebastian woke up with a severe headache. His mouth was dry and he was thirsty. He could barely remember what had happened yesterday. His deputy's birthday had been so wild, they had been out partying at the restaurant until late at night. His whole body ached. Sebastian struggled out of bed and wandered to the refrigerator. He had a typical man's refrigerator, only a few eggs, half a pizza, and a few bottles of beer inside. Finally, the beer came in handy. The man opened the bottle and sipped greedily on a big gulp. Now I wish I had some hot chicken soup," he thought dreamily. The man took a cool shower and looked for a clean shirt. Then he muttered something to himself for a long time and ironed it. There were signs of the lack of a woman's presence in the apartment. Dust on the shelves, a basket of dirty laundry stuffed to the top. The formerly fragrant orchids on the windowsills had long since withered away because he always forgot to water them. maybe I was wrong to divorce Laura. This place looked very different when she was here. Not a speck of dust, not a speck of dirt, and a hearty meal. What was I missing? Adrian was right, it's sad to be alone too. Sebastian suddenly thought. He pulled out the old photo album again and began to look at how he and Mariana were smiling and waving. They were so young and happy. Jesus! When will this obsession go away? Oh, Mariana, Mariana. Why do I compare every woman in the world to you? I will never get married again. I have no peace of mind with anyone else. I have to do something about it. Otherwise, I will die alone, like a lone wolf. Sebastian scolded himself. In the evening, a heavy thunderstorm broke out. Out of boredom, the man decided to check his social media, as usual. Since Sebastian was very handsome, many girls texted him and wanted to get to know him. They were all ready to meet right away. Sebastian did not take such meetings seriously, he only met some of them out of boredom. This time chatting with women lasted an entire evening. He could smell greedy money hunters a mile away and blocked them immediately. Other women turned out to be narrow-minded and illiterate after a little communication. He wasn't interested in such women either. Others already had several children, and Sebastian was not yet ready to take that step. Only one woman caught his eye. She had a picture of cream roses instead of her photo. Sebastian sighed sadly. Mariana, those are her favorite roses. The man scrolled through her profile story. Interesting that this stranger visits my profile almost every day and doesn't text me anything. Sebastian was intrigued and immediately texted her, "Good evening, maybe it's time for us to connect." The reply came instantly. From the first lines, he was immersed in communication with this mysterious stranger. Everything went easily and smoothly. For a whole week, Sebastian asked her to send her photo and insisted on seeing her in person, but the woman replied evasively, "Would a photo change anything? And if appearance is all that matters to you, then it's better to cut off our communication right away. For me, it is not that important what a man looks like. It is much more important how he acts and how he feels. In my opinion, people are attracted to each other if their inner world matches. Isn't that right? I'm not a supermodel, but I'm not ugly, just an ordinary woman. We'll definitely meet, but later. No rush. Let's get to know each other better first." By the end of the week, the man was desperate and decided that the stranger was just mocking him. Otherwise, what was the reason for the refusal? Finally, on Sunday, she texted unexpectedly, "Let's meet today. 7 p.m., Cafe Victoria downtown." Sebastian cried out with joy. "Yay! I wonder what she's like. Would she like me? What if it really works out? It seems like we think alike, our opinions are the same. So, what kind of suit should I wear? I have to pick out a tie and get flowers. Oh, my God. I'm acting like a teenager. I'm 45. It'll be funny if she's a fat lady about 10 years older than me." At 7 o'clock, Sebastian entered the cafe. He was holding a huge bouquet of delicate cream roses. Everyone who was in the cafe turned their heads after him, for he was a very good-looking man. He turned his head, trying to guess if there was that mysterious stranger among the women, and almost bumped into a janitor. He apologized and was about to go away when suddenly a handmade silver bracelet glittered on her hand. There could be no mistake. There could be no second bracelet like that. He shouted, "Excuse me, can I talk to you for a minute?" Then the woman turned to him, and he was shocked. It was his Mariana. Unbelievable. The same sad blue eyes and dimples on her cheeks. He rushed to her, embraced her, and held her close to him. "Mariana. My darling. Are you alive? But how? It's unreal. Darling, how happy I am to have found you." She cried and answered, "It was not you who found me. I found you on a dating website, you old womanizer. You were on your way to meet me." Everyone present was shocked and watched with open mouths this scene as if it was some TV show. Noticing this, Sebastian said, "Let's get out of here, it's too noisy. We have to talk about everything." Mariana shook her head negatively. "I can't, it's 2 hours before my shift ends, and I can't just leave." Sebastian laughed. "You don't work here anymore. Just let them know you're leaving. I'll take care of everything else." Sebastian took his beloved home and they sat opposite each other on the sofa and began to talk. Sebastian was perplexed. "Tell me everything. How did it happen? That night the house burned down, they said the wiring was faulty. I saw your burnt slippers and your sweater. They said no one survived the fire. I examined every millimeter of the house myself. Oh, my God. I buried you in my mind. And you were officially declared dead." The man took out the death certificate from the box with shaking hands and handed it to the woman. Mariana sighed. She was silent for a long time and began her sad story. "Shortly before our wedding, while you were at the university, your father came to me. I could tell by his tone and look that this was not going to be a good conversation. But I was shocked by what I heard. He's the one who forced me to do this. Your father said you had a fiancée, Laura, the daughter of businessmen, and that I was only an orphan and that I had nothing. And that he and your mother would do anything to keep us from getting married. He promised to give me a lot of money and help me to get a new passport if I went away. I would never agree to that. I tried to explain that I loved you and that I would never give up. It all seemed so crazy to me. Then he hissed like a snake. Dash, if you don't agree, you'll regret it. I will turn your life into a nightmare. Do you want to go to jail? I can do that. I have enough connections, believe me. Tomorrow a policeman will come and search you. He will find illegal substances in your pocket. You'll end up in a jail cell. And when you get out, no one will want you anymore. You'll be just an aged woman with a criminal past. You don't have a choice. Just do it the easy way. I'm counting to 3. I was really scared because your father had the right connections in legal circles and he could easily finish me in some jail, so I did what he wanted. The house burned down and I don't know how he did it. Now my name is Magdalena Duato, not Mariana Portillo. She handed him her passport. This is how I've lived my whole life. For years I've been renting an apartment 500 kilometers away. I brought up my son by myself. He's 20 now. But recently I felt so sad, so nostalgic. So I decided to come back here, to my native land. I heard about you, that you are divorced from Laura, so I decided to find you on social media. Sebastian couldn't believe his ears. Jesus! My poor girl. Please forgive me. I knew nothing. I was grieving and longing for you. If you don't believe me, ask Adrian. Do you remember my best friend? He helped me get out of that long depression. I thought I was going crazy. Then my parents insisted that Laura and I should get married. We ended up living with her for 10 years without being happy because we didn't love each other at all. So we decided to get a divorce. And my father, he died a long time ago, and my mother, too. Only God can judge them. I want us to be together again because I could never forget you. I never stopped loving you. The woman laughed. Couldn't forget? Seriously? You were in a hurry to see some woman right now, weren't you? You didn't know it was me, and you say you haven't forgotten. Honestly, I never had anyone after you. I gave all my love to my son, Silvio. I just didn't have time to look for a man. I was just trying to make ends meet so that my son had everything he needed. Sebastian began to flood the woman with questions. Wait, do you have a son? He is my son, isn't he? When did you give birth to him? Why didn't you say anything about the pregnancy? This is so cruel. Mariana started crying. Don't yell at me. I found out about the pregnancy when I left this city. Do you know how hard it was to bring up my son alone? And how bitter it was to explain to him that his father will never come to see him. So don't judge me. Silvio is a great guy. Sebastian changed his tone. I'm sorry, it's just that I dreamed of having children for so many years, and it turns out I could have raised a son. That's why I got mad. Not at you, but at Destiny. Can I see him? Please. Mariana answered, I don't mind, you're his father. But I don't know how he'll take it. He's a big boy now. So you have to explain everything to him yourself and try to find an approach to him. Sebastian couldn't take it anymore. He instinctively pressed himself against Mariana and began to cover her neck and face with passionate kisses. The woman was trembling. It was obvious that they both missed each other very much. The moon was shining softly through the soft curtains, peeking at the lovers. Mariana dozed, exhausted after the passionate love, her cheek pressed against his muscular shoulder. Sebastian could not fall asleep. He softly stroked her hair and inhaled her unusual fragrance. He wanted to shout with happiness to the whole world. He whispered all the time, My love, I won't give you up to anyone now. In the morning he jumped up in fright when he didn't find Mariana there. He was trembling like a fever. What had happened? Why had she left? Had I offended her in some way? Maybe it was only a dream, and I am going mad. Finally, he found a note on the nightstand, and there were only a few words. I'm off to work. Come over for dinner tonight at 8. I love you. Mariana. The address is on the back of the note. He began kissing this piece of paper and almost cried from happiness. Sebastian left work early for the first time. He bought a huge pizza, cake, champagne, and flowers for Mariana and decided to meet her from work. The cafe staff was shocked when such a handsome man in a fancy car with a huge bouquet approached the janitor. Sebastian asked where the manager's office was and walked inside. 15 minutes later, he took Mariana's hand, kissed her on the cheek, and they left. Everyone started a lively discussion about what was going on. Wow, I'm shocked at Mariana. She is so quiet, poor, unhappy, and has a disabled son. And eventually, she seduced such a handsome man. How did she do it? There is nothing special about her. She is just an ordinary woman. In the car, Sebastian gave Mariana her salary for the week. I talked to the manager. You don't work here anymore. I can't let my beloved woman work as a janitor and ruin her health. Here's your hard-earned money. Mariana was indignant. How? Why? What will I live on? It was so hard to get that job. I really need money now, and here I could take extra shifts. The man smiled. Well, I mean, you're a teacher. So you're going to work at a school, teaching children. Isn't that what you've been dreaming about all your life? And if you want, you can be just a housewife. You don't have to work. I have enough money to provide for us. Mariana sighed. 6 months ago, my son got into a terrible accident. He was hit by a drunk driver right on the crosswalk. Now he's disabled and can only move around in a wheelchair. Before that, he was a promising soccer player. He has been awarded several times. He needs urgent surgery. If it is delayed, he will never get back on his feet. Where will I get so much money? This surgery is very expensive. Even if I sold a kidney, I wouldn't have enough money. My heart is aching when I look at my son. I try to encourage him. I save money little by little, and at night I scream into my pillow. Anyway, let's go to dinner with Silvio, you'll see. Sebastian entered the house and shook hands with the boy. He thought to himself, my God, he looks just like me when I was young. Silvio was surprised. Mom, do we have guests? You didn't tell me anything. Is it someone from your work? Mariana blushed and felt embarrassed, and Sebastian took a deep breath and told it like it was. No, Silvio, I'm not your mom's colleague. I am your father. My name is Sebastian. I only found out about you yesterday. It's not my fault, believe me. I'd like to communicate with you if you don't mind. The boy changed his face, gritted his teeth, and turned to his mother. Mom, you knew who my father was, that he was alive and well, and you kept silent? Why? I asked you about it 100 times as a child. Is that fair? And you, Daddy, for 20 years you never came to visit your son, and now you're madly in love? Go to hell, all of you." And he abruptly turned the wheelchair around and went back to his room, slamming the door. Yeah, it was not the kind of meeting Sebastian had hoped for, but he said out loud, no one promised it would be easy. He's already grown up, and suddenly someone claims to be his father. He needs time to accept that fact. I'll try to talk to him calmly again. Don't cry, I'll find an approach to him, I promise. He knocked quietly on the door and asked, "Silvio, may I come in? We need to talk. If not, I'll understand and leave." The man grumbled grudgingly, "Well, come in. I guess now you will tell me that you are an astronaut, polar explorer, or 007 agent and that you could not share any information about yourself for 20 years. I have heard many such stories. Only I am not 5 years old. The noodles aren't holding on my ears anymore," he said sarcastically. Sebastian sighed. "Silvio, answer me one question. Do you have a girlfriend?" He was confused. "Yes, her name is Natalia. Why?" His father continued, "Then you will understand me. Do you love her?" "Yes, very much. And she didn't leave me, even though I'm disabled. We are trying to raise money for my surgery together." Sebastian continued, "Silvio, your mother and I fell in love when we were in our 20s, just like you are now. My parents were against it because she was an orphan, but I disobeyed them, and your mother and I started to live together. And just try to imagine, I came home and found out everything had burned down, and your mother died. And I didn't know anything about you, that is, that Mariana was pregnant. Only yesterday your mother confessed that it was my father who intimidated her and made her fake her death. And later she found out she was pregnant. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Your mother and I are both victims of my parents. They screwed up our whole lives. And don't hold a grudge against your mother. What could she tell you? They even made her change all her papers. But I found you now. So what's stopping us from communicating? Just like that, like human beings, like family? I understand perfectly well, you are a grown-up man, and I'm not going to teach you life or educate you. But I want to be part of your life, to help you, to give you some advice when you need it. Is that so bad?" Silvio timidly held out his hand and shook it. "I'm sorry, I didn't know it was like that. It's just that my mom never told me anything. She just said we couldn't see each other, and that was it. So I got mad. I thought for a long time about why my father never wanted to meet me after all these years." Sebastian said, "Let's go eat pizza and have tea and cake. Your mom must be worried to death, thinking we're arguing here." When a frightened Mariana saw the father and his son coming out peacefully, laughing and chatting about something, she felt as if a huge stone had been removed from her soul. Thank God. They're getting along. Sebastian kept his word and helped find money to pay for his son's surgery. He got a huge loan, borrowed from friends and colleagues, and placed Silvio in the best clinic with a well-known professor of neurosurgery. Fortunately, they made it in time, and a year later the boy was already running and playing soccer as before. He and Silvio became best friends. The son introduced his father to his fiancée Natalia. He really liked the girl. She was a cheerful, optimistic person. She strongly motivated and supported his son during rehabilitation and knew how to encourage him to do exercises through the pain. Natalia took care of him as if he were a child. Through his friends, Sebastian got Mariana a job as a primary school teacher at a nearby school. She didn't need this job for the money, but for her soul. He saw how much she enjoyed her job. He remembered how she dreamed of becoming an educator. Mariana happily checked the children's workbooks and told him every night about her students, and he just smiled and was happy for her. Sebastian sold his apartment and bought a big house so there would be enough room for everyone in his large family. What a joy it is when you come home and your beloved wife, son, and future daughter-in-law are waiting for you. Everyone is laughing and telling each other stories. That's what a really friendly family is all about. In addition, Natalia found a funny little puppy somewhere, and they immediately nicknamed him Baxter. So now there were even more family members. And it doesn't matter anymore that because of the intrigues of his parents, he wasted so many years. The main thing is that finally, they are together. Now Sebastian, sitting at the dinner table as head of the family, looked at his son and Natalia and told, "So, kids, don't wait too long to get married. Because we really want to babysit our grandchildren." They only blushed and laughed. Laura, Sebastian's ex-wife, also had a wonderful life. Soon after the divorce, she met a nice man. He worked as a manager in their company and, as it turned out, had been secretly in love with her for a long time. The couple got married, and Laura finally got pregnant. Despite all the doctor's doubts, an adorable child was born. Laura thought of Sebastian many times and thanked him in her heart that it was he who had decided to divorce her, because she certainly would not have taken that step herself, otherwise neither of them would have been happy.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.